if I were in a swing state, I probably would have voted for Trump at the time.
Yeah, walk me through that.
I was sympathetic to it because of the border crisis that Biden allowed. He allowed essentially what amounted to an invasion of just allowing people to come over the border endlessly. I think that's a valid conservative talking point. That is correct. What did Trump do that has brought the border crossings down by 99
illegal
things? I believe
8%. He has stopped any asylum claim from people who cross the border illegally against U.S. law. If you present yourself at the border for asylum, or if you cross the border illegally, you are considered an arriving alien. And arriving aliens are able to claim asylum. And Trump has tried to stop all of that.
This is the philosophical question at hand, which is, when is it okay to break the law in service of a greater good? And I would say in this case, denying asylum claims is the correct thing to do for the purposes of national security. The entire legal system is based on vibes. The entire legal system is based entirely on subjectivity, the reasonable person standard.
Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description.
To give some context for people, the first and only time I think we've actually spoken is a debate that we had about whether or not this was hosted by Lauren De Laguna, or was it hosted by Cherry? I think it was hosted
by Cherry.
Hosted by Cherry, where Lauren De Laguna was a participant alongside you. I forget who else. But we were arguing about whether or not it might have been Josiah. I don't remember, but
I think it was Josiah.
Yeah, whether or not it was.
Josiah is so forgettable, so we can be forgiven for not remembering if he was
very forgettable. Yeah, whether or not he was disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That was the last time we spoke. In that conversation, which seems like a lifetime ago, I remember you taking the mantle of more centristy, and then I saw that you actually advertise yourself a little bit as an enlightened centrist. I guess my only question is, like, what do you think about that chronology? Do you think that's right? And is it tongue in cheek, this enlightened centrist moniker?
It's meta ironic.
Yeah.
So there's three types of there's a J-Regian video, or a video from J-Reg, but this is J-Regian philosophy. There's irony. Or there's sincerity, right? Which is just saying, like, hey, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I'm just telling you what I am, right? That's sincerity. Then there's irony, like, oh, I'm a Republican. Yeah, I'm a Republican. Like, sure, yeah, I hate poor people. I'm a Republican. That's irony. Then there's post-irony, which is like, no, I'm a Republican. I hate poor people. No, I'm a Republican. Like, and I genuinely try to, even though I'm saying something that is insincere, but I'm giving the illusion of sincerity. And then there's this horrible realm called meta-irony, which is when, and this is what a lot of like Sam Hyde and Andrew Tate and Hassan Piker type people do, including myself. It's not just terrible people that are in that category. It's a category of communication, which is meta-irony is there's truth to it, but it's also tongue-in-cheek.
You said Hassan and
Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tate. These are the greatest people.
And
that's me being ironic. Yeah, right. Sorry.
There you go. And Jon Stewart also would fall. Bo Burnham too. It's like the Bo Burnham song about welcome to the internet, and the FBI killed Martin Luther King. It's like, well, I don't know if he believes that the FBI did kill Martin Luther King. It's like, seems like he does. I kind of do. But meta irony is when you put forward things that have truth to it, that even the person who is putting out the meta irony isn't certain what the actual meaning is. So, like, enlightened centrism is actually not. I suppose, ironically, unironically, call myself an enlightened centrist. I believe the answer always lies in the middle of two extremes. Where in the middle is obviously different, but the correct perspective on any issue is a synthesis of right wing and left wing considerations. The ironic part then comes in of like, well, it's hard to explain. Yeah, it's hard to explain humor in an effective way.
But. I know. I should be upfront though. I have a terminal condition, and that terminal condition is absolute sincerity.
Being a lawyer
at all times. Yeah, no, I have real trouble, and even just in that instance, not being incredibly sincere all the time, and I think it limits me in some way sometimes, but it also, I think, grounds me out and makes sure that people think that, they know when I'm saying something. Usually, I'm being incredibly authentic. So if there's some level of, like, I'm going to treat things that you say Seriously,
with sincerity.
With sincerity, yeah. So, and I'm sorry if that ruins your bit.
No, it makes it much easier. Makes it much easier to exploit. No, I'm over implying a level of look. I make some like for example, I made a video. One of the video I made is called Jeanette McCurdy is literally a fascist.
Jeanette McCurdy from iCarly?
Jeanette McCurdy from iCarly, because she said that Jordan Peterson's self-help authoring program or whatever like was really good for her. And so I made a whole video of like, holy shit, I was a fan of Jeanette McCurdy like for so long, and then I didn't realize that she supports a fascist. And the whole video is me like, if you came across it for the first time, you wouldn't be able to tell.
Are you Peterson guy?
I mean, if you watch my videos, OG pre-Daily Wire, Jordan Peterson.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I take these opportunities with people who are centrist who think, for example, that there's some, in the middle of the dialectic, there's some truth there, or there's, in the case that we have in the United States, my goal is always, and I'm just gonna be upfront with that, is to push you around a little bit and to get you to admit that we're undergoing and living in an authoritarian regime by a horrible, evil person who wants to become the authoritarian. And so my goal in these conversations I had kind of with a more centristy type lawyer, was that yesterday, as early as yesterday, maybe yesterday or the day before, is to push people around a little bit and be like, hey, do you acknowledge that we're living in what I consider to be reality? And so that's typically like, so when someone describes himself as a centrist in this environment, typically, I can hear that one of two ways. I can hear that either A, politically, traditionally, you're a centrist in that you are not on the far left or far right of the like economic interference with markets kind of deal, or socially, right? Or I hear that as centrist in kind of waffling on Trump. And so I'm just being honest about I'm trying to figure you out. Like, where are you in the sense? Are you in both senses of the word, or some third sense that I'm not picking up on?
So first off, I would never in a million years call myself a centrist as such. The only person that the enlightened centrist and the radical centrist hates more than the far left and the far right is the neoliberal moderate status quo. Okay, the Chuck Schumers, the Mitch McConnells, they're the worst. Now, do they keep the lights on? Yes. And is there value there? Of course. And that is in some sense a conservative sensibility to be like, well, our societies are working pretty well, all things considered, so we should not change them too much. It's like, yep, that's a valid point conservatives often make. The progressives correctly point out, though, that, hey, shit's changing all the time. New technology, new social changes and norms. We should probably adapt our systems to reflect the changes in the environment. And so, I mean, it's a philosophical thing where, I mean, it's virtue ethics, right? Between any virtue lies in between two vices, right? You've heard of this?
I've not.
It's like an Aristotelian
quote.
I think it's I should know this. I think it's Aristotle. Basically, like any virtue, like confidence. Confidence is in between insecurity, in which you have no confidence, and arrogance, which is you're overly confident to the point where it's not justified. Then you have restraint or something. It's like, well, you can be indulgent and just eat every piece of chocolate that you come in contact with, or you can starve yourself and be a monk. And I suppose, monks would take that angle, but basically everything, all virtues come down to balance. Okay. And there's left-wing and right-wing considerations. And every person who's not insane believes this, whether they admit it or not. Like you agree that there are people who are way too far left, right?
Yes.
And you agree that there are people who are way too far right?
Yes.
And do you agree that both the far left and far right within the next 10 years could conceivably influence the broader discourse enough such that their political will begins to be realized?
Yes. Okay.
So it's not just far left bad, far right bad. Hypothetically, the far left exists, and hypothetically, the far right exists. It's no. Especially nowadays, the political landscape is fracturing at a rapid pace. When Trump is dead, the right, I don't even know what the right is going to look like. It's going to be a mishmash of Christian nationalism and I don't know, barstool, like conservative libertarian type shit, and then the left, is going to be split between the class populists and the more race woke side of things. So the landscape is rapidly changing. So now more than ever, we need philosophical enlightened centrism. That's how I see it.
I find that incredibly interesting what you just said, because it reminds me of a conversation that people often have about Star Wars, and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. So
Hit me.
People, what you just described to me, it is approaching, maybe you didn't say it directly, but a kind of yin yang, like balance type view. And there is this kind of view of the balance of the Force in these Star Wars circles, right? Where people view, Anakin is bringing balance to the Force because he, ended some of the Jedi.
He became dark,
and he became dark, and then he's bringing balance by also defeating at the end the dark guy. I view it differently, and I think also George Lucas views it differently. I view that the darkness is the aberration. That is to say,
the cancer
is the cancer, right? So bringing balance means eliminating the cancer from your body. And I don't view it in the right-left sense of the word. I view one drop of it as, eliminate the process of getting America into balance is an elimination process. And it's an elimination of the cancer. And that cancer, I view, is not something that we need to be in balance with, but something that must be excised from and I view that as Trumpism and authoritarianism. And so I view it not as, and that's why I also think, by the way, the comparison of Mitch McConnell and put him in the same bucket as Chuck Schumer is an aberration for me, because I view Chuck Schumer as someone who has much, much less, if any, of the, maybe has some, right? Because he's weak and is capitulating sometimes, but I don't view him as having a drop of that cancer, where I see Mitch McConnell as being turned. Now he might have some regrets, but being a tool of darkness. And so I don't view it as a balancing that needs to be struck with MAGA. Perhaps there needs to be a balance struck in the more like traditional political sense or economic sense. But I really do view my orientation and my job and role is excising a cancer, not coming into balance with it.
I agree. It's called, there's four factions at any given time. There's the freak right, the normal left, and the freak left. And the freak right and freak left are the cancer. Now, the freak right contains all the MAGA cultists who worship Trump, literally like worship like a deity, like at the megachurch rallies where they paint him as like Christ-like figure. That's insane. That's freakish behavior. And so I mean, I was thinking about what we could talk about, and generally I'm much more interested in talking to people about all the things we could disagree on. So I wrote down some things that you being are you
a lawyer?
Is your goal? What's that?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me if I'm a lawyer. But yes, go ahead. Sorry.
You're a lawyer. Yes. Yes. But are you like trying to get involved with Democratic political apparatus stuff? Like, are you trying to get involved in the DNC and all that?
So I did before the great Destiny situation happened. I was helping him interface with DNC candidates, and we had a bunch of interviews lined up with governors, with a bunch of members of Congress that obviously had to end. Me personally, I have some people I know. I've interfaced with some Democratic candidates, but right now I'll say undecided.
Okay, that's fair. Well, I don't know. I mean, we can talk about Trump. You and I are going to... So I'll say you and I likely will agree on many, many, many things, but that's not interesting. So do we agree that Trump is a serious problem? Yes. Do we agree that MAGA-ism is certainly in its extreme forms, like a fundamentalist religion that is a cancer beyond all belief? Yes. It's disgusting. Do we agree that, for example, the degree to which Trump lies about Kilmar Abrego Garcia having MS-13 on his knuckles is disgusting? Yes. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of terrible shit. I guess I'm more inclined to then. Yeah, of course. I think Donald Trump is. If hell is real, I suspect Donald Trump is going to hell.
Interesting. So can I ask you the question?
Yeah, who did I vote for?
Yeah.
I live in Texas, so my vote doesn't matter. I voted for, and because it doesn't matter, I went and voted for Jill Stein. Because I wanted to send a message.
Re-Palestine?
Because I regarded what was... I thought there was... we're killing too many children there, and it's disgusting. And I think it's a large part, if not the only... It's not the only reason, but it's a large part why Kamala lost. And I thought Trump was evil. With the most I've felt like Trump is pure evil, which is, even that is an exaggeration. Pure evil is a philosophically fraught term. Sure. Is when he made that AI video about Gaza. You know, the...
Oh, I know it, yeah.
Like Trump, yeah, where you talk about casinos and shit. I was like, to see dead children on my timeline and then to see that video felt truly satanic in a sick way. So that sucks. Kind of hilarious, though, how he's turned about it. He's what is he going to recognize Palestine as a state, according to certain rumors? He hates Netanyahu. Thank God.
I view I think there is a breakage between Netanyahu and Trump. I don't view it as, at this point, at all changing anything in terms of the potential benefit for Palestinians. If anything, sorry, I'll be more affirmative to that. Donald Trump is bad for the Palestinians, notwithstanding the fact that there's a potential breakage with respect to recognizing Syria. Allegedly, they might, with building deals with the Gulf states, which I think are aligned and have an interest in stopping the war in Gaza potentially and normalizing with Iran. I think that those are obviously things that Israel does not want, or at least Bibi does not want. So I view that as a true potential collision within members of the administration who are pushing for closer ties to the Gulf states and wanting to pivot to Asia, and Bibi Netanyahu, who wants to push for a war with Iran. I view that as a true kind of collision, but I also view that collision as existing with Biden, and so I don't view that as something significant of Trump. I don't think the Biden administration wanted a wider war with Iran. So just to be clear about that. That said, it's worse for it's worse for Palestinians because he's given Bibi an open hand with the Palestinians, and right now, I don't know if you saw the recent news. They're planning to, there's reports, if you want to go by the reports, to move 1 million people from Gaza to Libya, where there are open slave markets, and it's been in a state of civil war
I don't doubt it,
for years and years. That if anything is good for the Palestinian people, that can't be optimal. And the amount of death we're seeing now, where I do think that there's vital intent on behalf of the Israeli regime, I just can't fathom how anybody who has this as their main issue could fathom a vote for Jill Stein, which you must have known. If it was a futile gesture in Texas, which is getting more swingy, getting more purpley, if it was a futile gesture in Texas to vote for Kamala, surely it was a futile gesture in Texas to vote for Jill Stein.
Of course. Voting is irrelevant if you live in a non-swing state. That's the reality for an individual. Now you can do the rain dance thing of like, well, if everyone had that attitude, it's like, okay, well, I don't know. It's like recycling. It's like, is that going to solve the environmental crisis? It's like, no, it's helpful and everyone should recycle, I suppose. But like, whether or not you recycle is not affecting climate change. It needs to be large scale systemic change. So whether or not that's a separate issue though. It's not really super relevant. If I were in a swing state, I probably would have voted for Trump at the time.
Yeah. Walk me through that.
Well, I do want to talk about.
Yeah, sure.
I suppose the more interesting conversation we can have is
you saw Trump as a lesser evil than Kamala Harris, is what you're telling me right now. At the time, do you still think that? I'll ask. I
don't know. It's counterfactuals are impossible to say. I don't think Kamala would be doing. I don't think Kamala would be doing what Trump is doing in Riyadh.
So I won't give you the counterfactual. I'll ask, if you had the power right now to substitute Kamala Harris into the presidency, would you do it?
No, because I would be subverting democracy, and I love democracy far too much.
No, but assume that there was some method to do so, and
I don't know.
It was
maybe
constitutional. So you're unclear.
Maybe. Yeah. Here's what I'll say. I think this is the interesting conversation we can get into, which is, do you acknowledge all of the multitude of valid reasons why people would vote for Donald Trump over Kamala?
I take valid to be good reasons, and they
reasons that are entirely understability.
And so, understandable I view as different than good. I think that there are quote unquote understandable.
Okay, and good,
reasons.
fine, good.
Yeah, if by good you mean, do I recognize that? No, I don't see there as a good reason to. I don't think there's a good reason to vote for Trump. Is the answer no?
Okay. I was sympathetic to it because of the border crisis that Biden allowed. He allowed essentially what it was amounted to an invasion of just allowing people to come over the border endlessly. I think that's a valid conservative talking point. That is correct. Because Trump put a stop to it effective immediately. Border crossings are down in to like 0.2% of what they were a couple of months ago.
Yeah. So when you
that was entirely done through executive order. It didn't need to be done through legislation. And the bipartisan bill that Trump killed was, according to Republicans, and I have yet to hear why they're wrong, was a bad bill because it codified catch and release. And catch and release is the biggest joke of a policy that has ever been put on our border.
I mean, I want to address let's dwell here. I think this is really super interesting stuff. So there are a bunch of premises here. The first is Joe Biden allowed this to happen. And when you say allow, you mean he encouraged it, or do you mean he did not do everything in his power to stop it?
Willful negligence type stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So let's touch on the Trump numbers now. I think that Trump has been successful in getting those numbers down, but I think that success has been due to illegal conduct, illegal action. For example, stopping all asylum claims from people, which Joe Biden started, but he's expanding that by sending signals using illegal renditions and deportations to a gulag in El Salvador, by denying people due process.
I think that's disgusting.
So yeah, if you start treating these people like they have no rights at all, if you start being like a dictator and breaking the law, you get the numbers down because you build a reputation that you might get sent to see caught. But I don't give him credit for achieving aims illegally, right? It would be like saying, okay,
that's fine. That's fine.
Right. Like imagine that it's someone were to tell you,
I'm less concerned. Yeah. Rule of law is important.
It's more important,
but it is not,
because if the problem is an illegal,
so
let's be clear about this, right? What is your problem with immigration, illegal immigration?
What's the problem with having people just flood over the border endlessly?
Yeah, what's the problem with it?
I believe in a nation, and a nation has to have borders. And I think that people are not interchangeable economic units, and having people just flood over the border, you eventually dissolve your country. Like, I think it's a bad thing if you live in the United States and you cannot speak any English whatsoever.
Okay, so let me just have a couple questions there. So, were we a nation before 1870 when the first restrictive immigration law was passed? So all through the founding era and up to 1870s, we had open borders policy in the United States. There was no immigration service. There was no, the only.
Well, let me flip this around on you. Are you for open borders? Do you think we should dissolve our borders?
No.
Why not?
If by open borders you mean having just no immigration or customs and border, the answer is no. You can play 20 questions if you want. I'm happy to answer your questions. If you want to ask me a bunch of questions first.
Yes, I do. I want to answer. Okay. Why are you against open borders?
If I answer your questions, will you answer my questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe.
Why am I against open borders? I think that we need an orderly process of immigration that checks people who, for the reasons stated, like who are prone to committing crimes. That checks individuals for potentially if they're bringing in viruses into the country. There are people who bring in viruses. We need
Iranian proxies. Foreign
a robust border patrol to. There's a lot of crime attended to the borders, including human trafficking, including importation of illegal substances, things like that, which having a robust immigration process allows for. So if by open borders you mean a policy that lets anybody walk across and we're not even monitoring the border, I think every sane person should be against that. You could have.
That's what effectively was happening under Biden.
No. It was, so what you're talking about. So any period in time in which, so would you think, for example, when there was a huge immigration wave under like Bush and in the 90s as well, 80s, was that an open borders policy? Even though Bill Clinton was passing restrictive immigration laws to make it more difficult, I mean, it was a huge problem. Illegal immigration, and millions of people crossed before Biden took over. So it's not because of America.
Those were the dreamers, right?
No, not all of them are dreamers.
Children are dreamers.
No,
right?
not all of them were dreamers. It's a big border, right? And so the fact that you have a lot of people crossing the border illegally, isn't an indication that that's the policy that America wants. In fact, America has been clear that they don't want him. In the 90s. IRA was passed, which was one of Bill Clinton's reforms to immigration that said, if you cross the border without inspection and admission, you are ineligible for most kinds of relief. And it's still the case that there are limited forms of relief. If you cross the border illegally, you're not eligible to adjust your status. You're really only eligible under like asylum, a special immigrant juvenile visas, things like that. So it is, America has consistently under Democratic presidents passed restrictive immigration laws to elaborate that the process, that America has a policy against illegal border crossings. They made it a crime to cross the border illegally. And so you cannot construe that, right? Obama deported more illegal immigrants than any president.
True. Tom Homan worked for the Obama administration.
So in what sense can you say Democrats are pro open borders? If all of these things that I'm saying, you're not contesting them, in what sense is that open borders?
Why were the border crossings as significant as they were? Why was catch and release not immediately ended? Do you agree that catch and release is an awful policy?
It's an inevitable policy. It's not a question it's inevitable.
Okay, hold on. Let me describe to you my understanding, and let me be clear.
Yeah.
I know very little, and yet I say things with great confidence. So this is your opportunity to set me right. Catch and release, my understanding, is person crosses the border illegally. They just go through a hole, coyote smuggles them over, and then they walk immediately towards Border Patrol. And they walk up to Border Patrol and they say, I am claiming asylum. Border Patrol says, okay, we'll process you. That processing is, okay, what's your name? You have any identification if you have it? If you don't, okay. Your name, we have all your data. We're going to give you a cell phone. And I think it's between like $250 and $1,000 or something like that. I think it's a Visa gift card. It varies. And then they go, okay, we need to process you for asylum. You have to have an asylum hearing. We'll call you about it. And that asylum hearing can be anywhere from 6 months to 5 years. And in the meantime, you're free to go.
When people
is that a more or less accurate conception of catch and release?
No, I think it's both too broad and too narrow. So it's too, So
it's very enlightened centrist. Tell me.
When people refer to catch and release, what they're talking about are certain individuals are subject to what's known as mandatory detention under the law. That is, it is purported under the U.S. government or statutes, right? The U.S. statutes, that certain people shall be detained. And it doesn't appear to give much discretion. Maybe there are one-offs that the Attorney General can grant of letting people who are subject to mandatory detention to let them free. But in general, when people refer to catch and release, they're saying individuals who should be subject to mandatory detention under the law are being released into the country. And generally the policy of letting people who otherwise should be in immigration detention into the country. And the reason that happens, so when I say it's too broad, you're referring to like benefits that might be given from immigration, or like money oftentimes it's by states. Oftentimes states will give benefits.
No, I don't care about the cell phone and the dollar.
That stuff isn't really what I would say it's too broad in that sense. And what I mean to say is like the catch and release problem has to do with the issue of detention and purported mandatory detention and the capacity of the government to actually hold these people. And the fact is, we have 60,000 beds, and we at no point in the United States history have had the capacity to hold everybody who is subject to mandatory detention under the immigration laws. So when I say it's inevitable, a catch and release is just a function of the fact that Congress does not sufficiently fund immigration beds, detention centers, and the amount of officers that exist so that we wouldn't have catch and release. That's what I mean by it's inevitable.
That's why we had the remain in Mexico policy. Why did Biden let the remain in Mexico policy expire?
That's 20, 30,000 immigrants. That's not going to change the dial much at all. And in general, the reason why it was, in addition to all the problems of processing people, right? It's hard to process a claim effectively. Oftentimes, if you're in another country, to get their lawyers there to effectively there are a lot of costs that aren't internalized in the Remain in Mexico policy, and it's using up a lot of goodwill with Mexico right now. We should try to be more, I think, amicable with Mexico. Mexico can put an absolute bar on who is subject to that asylum. It doesn't apply to Mexicans, right? It only applies to non-Mexicans. And it only, at its maximum, 20, 30,000 people. So that it's a very marginal policy. And so none of that, under that theory, we have catch and release right now, right? We have catch and release right now because, so you would agree, right? Under the definition of catch and release that I provided to you, and under really any standard definition of catch and release. We have catch and release right now because the Trump administration is apprehending people and letting them go that otherwise would be subject to mandatory detention. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. And what are the numbers?
Yeah. What is the scale?
No. So it's probably millions of people are subject to mandatory detention in this country. But we only have like 60,000 beds. ICE has said that we need billions and billions of dollars more of capacity to even enforce, for example, the Lake and Riley Act, which was passed by this Congress bipartisanly, I should add, shamefully, I should add. So it just is the case that we have had catch and release under every single presidency, including Trump's second term right now.
Okay, so then what did Trump do that has brought the border crossings down by 99
illegal things?
I believe 8%.
Illegal things.
Okay, like what?
Yeah, so I'll give you a bunch of examples. So number one, he has stopped any asylum claim from people who cross the border illegally against U.S. law. That is so under U.S. law, if you cross the border illegally, that is a crime for sure. But if you present yourself at the border for asylum, or if you cross the border illegally, you are considered an arriving alien, and arriving aliens are able to claim asylum. And Trump has tried to stop all of that. And so the border crossings are down in one sense because he is illegally stopping enforcement of our asylum and Convention Against Torture laws. And that has disincentivized people to cross the border.
Right, I don't know. So I genuinely don't know this. You're saying the asylum laws are laws that have been passed by Congress.
Correct. And some are international treaties that America has acceded to. So the Convention Against Torture is a treaty.
International treaties.
Well, no. The asylum law is a U.S. law passed by U.S. government. So I just want to be clear. But I'm just saying there are international treaty obligations as well.
Okay, the treaty obligations I don't care about.
You should care about them because
we're talking about in the context. Hold on. We're narrowing the context. We're narrowing the context to legality in
No, I understand.
In the U.S.
So a U.S. treaty that has been ratified by the Congress has the force of law and is enforceable as law in the United States government. And if you look at the supremacy clause, it says, the U.S. Constitution and all laws made in furtherance of it or pursuance of it, and all treaties made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. So an international treaty that's been ratified by Congress has the force of law in the United States. That said, don't worry. We don't need to go into the Convention Against Torture and that kind of stuff because if you don't see the validity, even though it's absolutely true, of ratified treaties having the force of law, the asylum and refugee laws are U.S. laws under Title VIII.
Okay, and there's nothing in those laws that talk about if they're being abused or if they're being No, okay, well then this is an example of this. So this is now a philosophical question of: do you agree that there are some instances where it's okay to do things that are illegal for the greater good?
Yes.
Are there any cases where that's ever allowed?
Yes.
Habeas corpus, right, Lincoln?
Well, no. Sorry. So
suspending habeas corpus.
So the suspension of habeas corpus can be done legally or illegally. Now,
Lincoln did it illegally, I thought.
There's an argument about that, about whether or not the Supreme Court the Supreme Court didn't rule on it. It was one Supreme Court Justice, Taney, who while riding circuit ruled on it. And I think there's an open question about whether that suspension was done legally or not. Ultimately, it was ratified by Congress, different time. And, it's possible I could condemn what Lincoln did. I don't think it was necessary to suspend habeas corpus as
Fine,
they did.
But it's subjective as to whether or not it was necessary. You agree that it is a value judgment as to whether or not it is okay to break the law in service of some greater good.
Because I'm not I'm a moral subjectivist, I guess. I would say yes. I agree with that. It's a value judgment. It's
okay. How do we adjudicate? Yeah. How do we adjudicate whose preference is correct?
Well, what do you mean by preference being correct?
So for example, if I were to tell you, I believe that if Donald Trump was able to address the border crisis, stopping the flow of illegal immigrants, which included people who we don't know who they are, foreign adversaries. Iran loves to have proxies, and we're Israel's biggest supporter, so it makes perfect sense that Iran would have people in the United States now that are ready to attack. China certainly does. If we're going to go to war with Taiwan, it would behoove the Chinese to have people in the United States across to our border very easily. So that's all just national security threat. Forget the whole idea of like cohesive culture and all that, which is a more amorphous argument. But just from a national security reason, we can say that illegal immigration is bad. Okay, so in order to protect national security, Donald Trump illegally suspended asylum laws, which were being abused by any reasonable, in my opinion.
When you say being abused, there were a lot of
people coming in. Yeah, people were coming in who wanted to work and were claiming asylum.
Yeah, something like 25 to 30% of claims were valid. The rest were not. And there were definitely people who were abusing the process who did not have genuine asylum claims.
Wait,
yes,
20,
that's true.
25% of claims were valid?
Something like 20 to 30 have been granted, yeah.
What do you mean? Like during the hearing?
Have had asylum hearings where their asylum petition has been granted. It's not on the order of
Right.
1-2%. It's like 20+%. Hang on, I'll just look it up right now. Hang on.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm trying to understand because so what that means is everyone who came over the border and claimed asylum gets caught, catch and release, like we discussed, or virtually everyone. Then they're in the country just hanging around, and then they get called for their asylum hearing, right? And you're saying of those, when people come from their asylum hearings, 20% of those, only 20% of those are valid.
So
Is that? Am I understanding that correctly?
So no. What I'm saying is, the denominator you're using is too small. Not everyone who claims asylum is under catch and release, because not everyone who claims asylum is subject to mandatory detention. And so some people, like when they were using the CBP1 app, were presenting themselves at a port of entry, not crossing the border illegal, and presenting themselves for an asylum claim, and then maybe they weren't subject to, mandatory detention. There could be people who came here on an immigration visa who validly applied for asylum. Yep. So the denominator of catch and release, that's just it's a little bit distracting you, because I'm not trying to claim anything about subgroups of people who claim asylum. What I'm saying is for people who have claimed asylum, here it's looking like in fiscal year 2023, something approaching 35% of asylum claims were granted by immigration judges as being meritorious. So that to me shows that, yeah, there's a problem of bad faith asylum claims for sure, but we're not talking about, a third or more are granted asylum.
Yeah. So this is the philosophical question at hand, which is, when is it okay to break the law in service of a greater good?
Okay.
And I would say in this case, Trump denying asylum claims is the correct thing to do for the purposes of national security, because too many people were crossing the border.
Just be aware of we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
So
slippery slope.
No, I just want to say, like, what you're saying is you're fine with Trump violating the law for national security interests. In this case,
No.
In this example,
I'm more specific. More specific.
Yeah, more specific. But in this case, you're okay with suspending asylum claims and breaking the law because of national security risk.
Which is something in principle you would agree with. You just don't think this is the right case.
Well, yeah. So I would take it of a more,
like, you would be okay. You would be okay in theory
with
a
much
president breaking the law.
It would be a much higher
fine,
threshold.
but
and this is why.
Okay, why? Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Because I view the U.S. law, like our rules-based society, a law-based society, because I view that as such a great thing pragmatically for utility,
yes,
for our style of life. Like, what are we preserving, right? And so
right.
when you say we're preserving our society, we're preserving our culture, the thing that's most worth preserving about American culture is the American constitutional system. So I'm not going to
disagree.
I'm not going to give up and in advance the American way of life, that is to say a rules-based order where we live in a society governed by laws and not men, just for any old idle threat or any old national security threat. Yeah, not even for 9/11. Yeah, not even for in times of actual war.
9/11 is not nearly
Nazis.
as bad as.
Yeah. Okay, the war on, so in the war, World War II, in this war, I'm not going to say, for example, the Japanese internment camps, that was the same exact rationale. Honestly, using the Alien Enemies Act for a lot of these, detentions. So it's going to have to be on the level of, nuclear threat, some kind of dictatorship. So what we're talking about for breaking the law is it's a very, very, very high threshold.
Fine. But you do, but ultimately, but that threshold is subjective. You recognize that,
correct?
Right?
Yeah. Well, because I think all ethics are subjective, but that's just
true. Well, this is the interesting conversation. Do you think the Constitution is sacred?
What do you mean by sacred?
Would you fight and die for the Constitution? Do you think the Constitution is?
I would fight and die for it.
Okay, I don't.
Sacred.
I don't.
Okay. Well, I think
the Constitution was written.
Good.
Well, yeah. I think the Constitution was written by men. And it contains flaws.
Yeah,
it contains things that are divine and perfect.
Hey, I would fight and die for my mom. She has flaws too.
True. Touche. Like the First Amendment. The First Amendment I would regard as sacred. I'm talking religious level. Like, No, the free exchange of ideas
let me
is
tell you
the
this,
most
right?
sacred thing.
So the Constitution, what's special about the Constitution, and if you respect the First Amendment, it's not the First Amendment itself. What really protects the First Amendment? What really protects the First Amendment? No, well, maybe, right? But the Constitution is the structure of the government, right? The checking power, the separation of powers, federalism, that's what really protects the First Amendment. Justice Scalia said it best. He had this talk in front of Congress. He said, the Soviet Union had a much better constitution in terms of the rights that it provided. It provided more expansive rights than America. But of course, they were just parchment guarantees, parchment words on paper. They don't mean anything unless you have a structure that is going to protect them. And when you start to eliminate the checks on executive balance, then the one right that you said that you will die for, that will go away too in time. And the proof is in the pudding. Right now, Trump is using this very crisis that you're saying is enough to say maybe he should do illegal things with asylum. He's using that rationale to fight the First Amendment in context of which you should be outraged from, because you think what's going on in Palestine is a genocide and you think that we should be speaking out in favor of that. And he's using the immigration authority and using the rationales of national security to what? To attack the First Amendment rights of people who are speaking out against what's going on there. And so that should be the highest level of fear of this claiming of authority to break the law.
Amen. And I talk about this all the time. To just be clear, since I come here, like I said, the least interesting thing I could possibly do is come talk to someone and agree with them all the time. So I'm specifically saying things that I know for sure we'll disagree on. If you were a Trump supporter, this would be the first thing I would have brought up is, Trump is literally, he says you'll go to prison if you burn a flag. He's censoring people for criticizing a foreign nation. This is about the least free speech president I've ever seen in my life. Well, I haven't lived very long, but that's ridiculous. But you and I agree on that, so it's not worth talking about.
But if you allow him to break this asylum law in this way, right? And that's just one example.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Because I want to stick with the broader philosophical conversation. Like a lot of these things people just take for granted, and I don't. Like, do you think every U.S. citizen should have the right to vote no matter what? Not no matter what. Do you think every U.S. citizen should have the right to vote?
No.
What are the exceptions? Here's a better question.
You should have to reach an age of majority before you're allowed to vote. And I take U.S. citizens to include babies.
Age of 18. Okay. But every 18-year-old So, for example, I do not believe you should be allowed to vote in this country if you cannot name the three branches of government.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
I disagree with that.
Do you think that's fascist to say that?
By itself, no. But I think it's often promoted by fascists. I'm trying to answer your question.
Sure. No, that's fair. One of my beliefs is that we should not be allowing so many people to vote. There's too many dumb people who are voting. If you can't name the three branches of government, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. Now, what would be really funny is if you asked me to name the three branches of government right now and I couldn't.
Yeah, no, but I bet you could. It's fun.
I hope so. Thank you for sparing me.
Do a thing with someone didn't know. No, I hear you. But the question is, I think, is the ultimate the same answer to the question of like when is it okay to break the law is who decides? Who decides, right? And I don't trust.
It's subjective.
I don't trust. So because the reason why I put such a high threshold before we're going to be able to, I'm going to give my okay to break the law, is especially of the government, right? So. Say one thing for regular citizens. I'll probably be even more gracious to regular citizens. If you want to steal that loaf of bread, you're Jean Valjean, I might give you a little bit grace. But it'll be a high threshold for there too. Like I don't typically agree with breaking the law, even in any context, right? But for the government, there's a super humongous extra burden is because of the who decides question. I don't trust the people to decide when it's okay to break the law for themselves. Now you might say, for example, in this case, you're okay with breaking the law with respect to, for the government to break its own law for Trump, but you're not the one actually making the decision. It's not P.F. Jung that's in charge of the executive branch. It's not P.F. Jung who's in charge of the court system that's determining this, or whether we're going to listen to the court system that's determining this. It's in fact crazy people. It's in fact MAGA fascists. And so when you give your sign off to breaking the law in this instance, you think what you're doing, maybe you can even limit your statement to say, well, I don't agree with it more broadly than this. But what you're actually doing, and for people who hear you, is you're giving implicitly the power of Trump to decide when it's okay to break the law and when it's not okay to break the law. And you can tell by his statements when he says the person who saves the country violates no law. We should be like Napoleon.
Right.
We can terminate the Constitution.
Very FDR sounding.
Well, in what respect do you think that that's FDR sounding?
I have to. I don't know. I have to do more research on FDR. I want to do a deep dive into FDR because my understanding is FDR essentially was like the god emperor of his time, who overrode Congress all the time, passed all kinds of executive orders, and basically what Trump said about he who saves his country breaks no law.
Violates no law. Or
That's just a dumb. Yeah. Basically, FDR said something much more sophisticated, but with the exact same tone. And FDR is regarded as one of the best presidents of all time. By many.
But listen, FDR listened.
Well, hold on, because sorry, I don't want to go down that to the point. This is. I just want to see if we acknowledge the philosophical divide here. It's a type 1, type 2 error problem. You're saying, Paul, if we co-sign, like you said, not even for World War II, not even for 9/11, whatever, breaking the law, never justified, because as soon as you allow the rule of law, as soon as you give tacit implicit acceptance of breaking the law, then the society is threatened. Like you said, rules-based law is sort of what makes America. That's okay. But then there's a type 2 error, which is, what if you stick to the law so much that you never are able to adapt and address the threats that are presented to you?
Well, yeah. So this is another reason why I think that violating the law is not necessary, right? So there are two things that I think would be required for me to say violating the law is justified. Both that there's a compelling enough threat, and also that it being necessary, right? But it is not necessary. Congress, if it wanted to, you have bipartisan support. You could get it for certain kinds of funding for the border wall, and the proof is in the pudding, right? They passed the Laken-Riley Act. And I'm happy if, at some point, to get into the bipartisan law that was being proposed in the Senate under Biden's term, which I think has been horribly misconstrued by Republicans, right? But it's not necessary. Congress could get off its ass and pass a law to increase capacity at the border. Even in this bipartisan law, there were adjustments to the asylum laws and changing of burdens and standards. That was unthinkable in a previous era for Democrats to sign off to. Yes, there were substantive changes to asylum standards in the bipartisan law that Republicans...
Earlier you said Trump illegally suspended asylum claims.
Correct.
Have the courts stopped him from doing that?
There have been some. I think there's currently an injunction working its way through the court.
If it's illegal, why hasn't he been stopped?
Well, there's right now. It's, I think, working itself through the courts, and I think there actually is a TRO that's been stopped by the district court. But again, there's also a fight right now about the scope of which courts can issue nationwide preliminary injunctions. That's also in the courts,
right? Which is I would say that's a valid issue.
It's absolutely a valid issue. But all I'm saying is, the Supreme Court has to weigh on that eventually, and I believe it to be illegal. And I think that, for example, like the Trump Muslim ban case, one of the carve outs that they did in banning travel was they made a carve out for asylum, because if you start getting rid of asylum and you say you can suspend asylum claims at all times, you're basically under what authority? And so I believe there actually is currently a court order against stopping processing those claims, but he's been very slow on moving on the court's orders or define them and all, and it has to work its way up before we have a nationwide effect.
So if the Supreme Court rules that it's perfectly legal to deny the asylum claims outright,
then I would say
you won't have an issue anymore.
I would disagree with the Supreme Court, but I would say that what Trump did was legal under the law.
And therefore wouldn't be as big of a deal.
It would not be as big of a deal because he wouldn't be violating the law according to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is the branch that says what the law is.
Right. So 9 unelected judges who, by pure chance, happen to be appointed, several of them, by Trump himself.
Yeah, in his favor.
Now, single-handedly, 9 people now decide what is moral or not for the rest of the nation?
Not moral or not. What's in accordance with the law or not. And if you have to understand here,
arguably,
I'm not trying to equivocate.
Your point is what is a...
Yeah. I'm not trying to equivocate between legality and morality. What I'm telling you is that as a deontological rule, you could say, or something, or as a rule utilitarian, whatever the term is, I'm going to, in order for you to show me that the government violating the law is justified, you're going to have to meet a very, very, very high threshold because of what I see as the societal ending consequence of that, right? So, and
I totally, and for the record, not that this will earn me any credit with your audience who hasn't even heard my most right-wing beliefs just yet. Actually, no, I think I said restricting voting rights, right? That's probably my most right-wing belief.
That's another who decides question. I want to linger there. So because who decides that, right? Like people say, if you're too stupid to vote, yeah, I think that there are some people who are really too stupid to responsibly vote. I do agree with that, but I just don't trust the process by which you would put people in boxes, and that's why I think it's just outside of the hands of the government.
Okay, well, so two things. First off, what I was going to say is I don't get in I wouldn't say screaming matches. I used to get in screaming matches with my dad, who's a very pro-Trump Fox News conservative.
Oh, nice.
But even this, I talk about him with like you don't understand. Like literally, the Kilmar Abrego Garcia thing is like, good. He's a gang member. I'm like, that he has no chance to prove that he's not a gang member, right? He's like, well, there's all these illegal immigrants. What are we going to give them all due process? I'm like, yeah, that's actually what has to happen. Otherwise, someone could snatch you up off the street, deport you, and you have no opportunity to prove you're a citizen.
But why doesn't that not compel you with like a suspension, assuming that it is illegal, right? So you don't have to assume that. You can say, I'm going to wait for the courts to figure that out. I'm presenting to you.
Okay, yeah.
But like, assume that it was illegal to do that. Like just like I assume you would think it was illegal to like spray AK-47s across the border and just kill people who cross the border illegally. But let's say that those policies were successful in stopping illegal immigration, both like the suspension of asylum claims, but also the random summary killings of people crossing the border. You wouldn't give credit to Trump for doing illegal actions that resulted in those results, right? Like just for example, the gang situation in El Salvador, if we did that in America and we got crime to like 1% because we're just throwing everybody in jail, different circumstances in El Salvador, I recognize that, but in America, you wouldn't be okay with that. And you wouldn't be like, well, look, Trump got the crime rate down. Yeah, he did so by violating law.
Well, and I suppose this is I think the difficulty of aligning our lenses to be looking at the same thing is because we're looking at this one, but I view as a lawyer, you rightfully and correctly, your standard of sort of what is good or not is the degree to which it maintains and abides by the, generally the rules-based laws. Like you said, that's the best thing about America. We're governed by laws, not men, right?
Do you agree with that?
No.
What do you think is better defines America other than our Constitution and laws?
I don't know about, sorry,
what
definition.
So like in terms of America, what would you see as more foundational, more bedrock to America other than our Constitution?
Good question. I would go deeper than America. I would say Western civilization. I don't know the degree to which we are grounded in. Yeah. I was gonna say the degree to which we're grounded in. Well, this will go off the rails.
I'll give you my opinion, right? So it's not our race, it's not our culture, right? Like what does our culture mean? Like my culture, as someone who lives in New York or in the East Coast versus someone who lives in Texas, is incredibly different. Or like the rural urban divide. Like we do not have a uniform culture in America. It's very, very, very different. It's not, maybe it's English, but that doesn't really divide us from like England and Australia. We're different from them too. There's what is the essential thing that makes us American? Not race, not culture. Is it religion?
Well, it is culture. It's 100%. It is culture. But the problem is culture is too vague. Because like you said, there's like New York is very different from Iowa, but like, yes, but both are very same compared to Sharia law.
But the
Saudi
unifying
Arabia.
thing, right? Yeah, I get that. But there's other non-American countries that don't have Sharia law. France is a unitary system. It's also a Western civilization.
Sure.
They also have rights there. But what makes us uniquely American, what grounds us, what binds us all together is a shared history and our U.S. Constitution. Those, I would say, are the two elements, is a shared history and the U.S. Constitution that's primarily premised on the narrative of overthrowing the English rule and then the establishment of a republic. That is what shares us and what binds us together. It's not these other things, because we don't agree on that stuff, right? We don't agree on trans people. We don't agree on race issues. We don't agree on the culture stuff. And so how can we say that binds us together?
A lot of people don't agree on democracy. I don't think democracy is sacred. I think free speech is sacred. I think human well-being is sacred, and obviously at this point in history, democracy has produced a great deal of that. But the idea that we're at the end of history, well, it's like I said, I don't believe that if you can't if you can't name the three branches of government, you should be able to vote. The fact that that is even allowed is a flaw in our system. Arguably, that's why Trump is elected, because people who aren't very bright went and voted for him. And had we put more stringent tests on it, he wouldn't have been elected. Now, your point is, well, but then who decides? It's a slippery slope. And I would say there's literally no system ever that can avoid that problem. You have to assume.
Where are the dictators and kings that respect free speech without some Republican form of government? Show me in history, like
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, so but like you say, you respect free
right
speech.
Now, the answer to the rule of law, when the question of who decides, ultimately comes down to a jury, right? Like in the most contentious cases.
No, it doesn't only go down to a jury.
Judges too, right?
Judges and juries. But also Congress. Congress can dispense justice, and also the president. I think that there's a balance here, and that sometimes juries dispense justice, and sometimes judges, sometimes Congress, sometimes president, sometimes states.
Yeah. So like for example, the idea that we should have you have to pass a test before you can be able to vote. You go, who comes up with that test? It's like, well, I don't know. We'd work it out. The devil's in the details, and we'd have to iron out that process. We'd have to review it and say, well, maybe we should ask questions that are not that like a Republican or a Democrat wouldn't be able to tell who wrote these questions. And there's ways that you can do that. It's like saying, well, should we have a citizenship test? It's like, yes. Well, who decides what's on the citizenship test? I don't know, but we have one now. Should we not have citizenship tests?
Yeah, no.
Who decided that 18 was the day that you get all of the rights entitled to you as an individual?
Yeah, no.
Why not 21?
There's
Why not
some
19?
line drawing. The thing that's I think better about the age line drawing issue is there are probably some 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds who we would feel sufficiently responsible for them to vote over a lot of 50-year-olds. I know a lot of 60. I want to be clear. There are 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds who are better patriots, who have a more deep and sophisticated understanding of our system of government and of our issues than like many 70-year-olds who yell at me on like Twitter Spaces and shit like that. In fact, I know some young children. When I say young children, 12, 13, 14, who have a better understanding of our way of life, of what makes America America, than many of the Trumpers that I talk to. The reason why we
Correct.
18, I don't have a problem with that, is you need to draw a line somewhere, and that line
Correct.
isn't, it isn't premised on some trait that is ripe for abuse. It's an age requirement. We have age requirements all over on all and everything, right? To get a driver's license.
Yeah, but hold on. You're looking at it. Yeah, I use the age example as a broader point. You said we have to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah,
like gun rights. We have to draw the line somewhere. You can own a pistol, but you can't own an RPG.
Yeah.
Okay, so where exactly do we draw the line?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, do you think it's okay to own AR-15s?
Depends. What do you mean? Do I think it's okay? What do you mean by that?
Do you think it should be legal for me to go buy an AR-15?
Do I think it should be legal to buy an AR-15? It depends. I think some people should be allowed to buy AR-15s, not everybody.
Should I, someone who has no criminal background but no training with firearms whatsoever?
Real
quick, how are you
in my perfect system? Probably not. But
how are you because you're not basing it off law. So what is? That's what I'm trying to understand. You're a lawyer, so your system is law. But even that, when the law is not clear, what is your moral system that you are using to adjudicate that decision?
Yeah. So when I can decide the law, right? I look around the world and I see that gun violence is much lower there. I noticed that, probably most of but I'm also weighing the fact that most of the gun violence in our country is probably handguns. And so,
Correct.
That's why I'm struggling with. I'm like, I think that America would be better off if I could make it legal to restrict gun ownership in some respects, but I don't know AR-15s would be the first thing I would go on. And I also know that AR-15 is kind of a broad term that there's a lot of disagreement about. And so I'm trying to be careful here. I probably, if I could decide what's legal, I would make it more restrictive to get guns. But if I'm hemmed in by the actual world, I know that me focusing on that policy is going to engender a lot of opposition, so I probably wouldn't focus on it. And I know the fact is that we have a shit ton of guns in this country already, and so any policy that I implement is going to have to deal with the practical reality of like, how am I going to actually get these guns out of the hands of the people who have them? Is it worth the trouble? And so, if you start removing those constraints, now I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to snap my fingers and disappear a bunch of guns from the street. But the reality is, as I start to think about it, is any policy that bans those guns is going to have to deal with the real world. And do I want to spend money, spend political capital, undergoing a wide-scale gun collection effort, a rebuying effort? Probably not. And so it's a difficult question for those reasons.
That whole thought process, very interesting because I guess what I'm teasing out is that is how. First of all, that's how I view that. I don't care the legality of things. Law is a secondary consequence of culture and morals. Like we write the laws that abide by our preconceived moral notions, and our moral notions far preceded our legal system, any legal system. And so I'm much more interested in that level of analysis than what is in accordance. Well, obviously, it's partly because I'm not a lawyer and I don't know the laws. So in some sense, it would make no sense for me to base my moral system on solely what is according to the law at any given moment.
Yeah, because do you think that societies? I understand that law is downstream of morality and ethics. I've never denied that. But once society has made those rules, don't you think if you're grounding down your subjective ethics somehow in consequences and results, look at the results of America's system of government. Over the course of 200 plus years, we have become the envy of the world in many respects. We have become the hegemon. We have become the strongest economy in the world. We have some of the strongest culture in the world. Like, our system has produced good results, and we should preserve it. And that requires sometimes enforcing laws that you don't agree with.
Let me tell you, the process that you just went through with the AR-15s, you're like, well, but I have to look at the real world, the political capital, there'd be all this opposition to it, blah, 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 whatever. That's exactly why I don't condemn Trump. Well, first of all, I do condemn Trump, but that's why I won't say Trump outright is evil, and the people who support him are supporting pure fascism.
Because hold on, you're being dishonest, the majority, or at least withholding your opinion.
No, I'm not. The majority of this country voted for Trump. That's a practical reality you have to consider. The majority of people who voted for Trump.
No, they didn't.
I could be wrong. Did Trump not win the popular vote?
He won the popular vote. He didn't get a majority.
Oh,
what do you mean?
The majority. He won the majority of the popular vote, didn't he?
No, he didn't.
How many people voted?
I don't know. Like,
it's like 150 million.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if this classic lawyer. What am I saying wrong? Did Trump not win? Oh, he won a plurality of the votes.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. He got like 49%.
Okay, but
he got the most of anybody, but didn't win a majority.
Okay. Yes. That will never convince anyone. That type of
should I just be like,
yes, I know you said, I know you're a lawyer.
Majority. He didn't win a majority.
I get it. You get why I find it irrelevant, right?
Okay, but I don't want to let it be said that he won a majority, because I think we shouldn't overstate his popularity.
Okay. But I'm asking that in the context of like, okay, but how do you wrestle with the fact? Okay, let me ask you a question. This is now a philosophical thing. You agree that there are many, many good, rational, law-abiding people that voted for Donald Trump and continue to support him.
Yes.
Do you agree that that's true? Why did they do that?
I think they've been deceived. I think many of them have the wrong information. I think many of them didn't take the time to vote.
The wrong information.
Yeah.
You don't think that I could spin together a narrative full of facts that is pro-Trump, or that you could even do that?
I'm sure I could, yeah.
So what do you mean wrong information?
So I take wrong information to be like misleading information, or sometimes it's outright falsehoods. So when I say wrong information, I'm including both fake news, fake information, lies, but also misleading true information. So that's what I mean to say.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Okay. So let me ask you this: do you think it's conceivable, or do you believe that there is people like this, who are intelligent, rational, law-abiding, moral people, who are far more, have as much information as one can possibly have, more so than you and I combined times 10.
Yep.
That's a lot. But someone who does not meet your criteria, they're not deceived, they're not misinformed, they know they're looking at the facts, they're genuinely analyzing the situation, and they, of their own accord, come to the conclusion, well, even though Trump is deeply imperfect for all of these reasons, I think Trump is still a better president, a better bet than Kamala Harris. Do you think it's conceivable for those people to exist?
No, probably not, unless they're an accelerationist that knows something I don't know and I'm actually wrong. But the answer to the question is probably not no.
Okay, see, that's so wild to me.
Why?
It's because it's a level of. I suppose it conflicts with the point earlier, which is like it comes down to value judgment on certain things.
Well, yeah.
Like,
So I'll explain it, right? So I take voting for Trump to be immoral. I consider it whether someone is immoral, a question of like my interpretation of what they do. And if someone is knowing everything I know, even more than I know, is able to consider everything I considered plus more stuff, is fully informed and apprised of the situation, and notwithstanding that fact, still votes for Trump, I take that to be deliberately intending some very immoral thing. Now, maybe at the margin, I could say maybe they're so good in other parts of their life that I would still consider them a moral person. And so maybe there's there's a carve out for some people who are like extra charity and do extra good things and have still come to that determination. So maybe I'll leave a small carve out there. But in general, I take voting for Trump to be immoral, and someone who does that knowingly, that's pretty vile.
There are people who would say the same thing about people who support AR. Like if you do not support banning AR-15s, you're you're immoral person. There's people who say that.
Okay, maybe so I'll fix this, right? So, because I think that maybe there's more of a category that's a little bit larger of like people who just who are
have a different value set of value judgments.
No, but the thing is, I take those value judgments to be indicators of whether you're a good person or not, right? So if your value is I like authoritarian government, I want to get rid of the U.S. government, I want to make it into a dictatorship, I don't think that like the values that I think make one a good person aren't compliant with that. So we're getting to the bedrock of what I think makes someone a good person. And part of what I think makes someone a good person is pushing for good results. And part of pushing for good results mean not destroying America as I see it. And so that's why, you're really stressing, the very things that I think make someone a good person. Now, I can think of situations of people who are fully knowledgeable, fully intelligent, fully rational, who just do so much other good stuff in their other life besides politics that I would still say they're good people.
I get what you're saying. You're evaluating it. Okay. And maybe let's step away from evaluating whether good and bad on whole, because that's kind of irrelevant. I said earlier, I would love if we restricted people's voting rights by saying, if you can't name all three branches of government, you're not allowed to vote. That's a move in an authoritarian direction, correct?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Do you agree that? But does that make me, if my beliefs were limited to that, which I mean, when it comes to authoritarianism, other than I think the government should also march the FBI into Facebook's headquarters and demand that they make their algorithms public, that I would support. Also, I think we should seize like half of the endowments of a lot of the universities that facilitated the student debt crisis and use that to forgive a lot of the student loan. I'd be in favor of some authoritarian stuff like that, but I don't think that would destroy democracy. I think that would just move us slightly on the scale a little bit more towards away from pure democracy, but certainly not towards fascism. You agree that you can do things that are in the step in an authoritarian direction that is still good overall?
Yes.
Okay. So then how do you know that the people who voted for Trump didn't just have the value judgment that they just think, well, I think right now we're moving towards, I think we just need to add a little bit more authoritarian shit to our system.
Well,
I'm being very vague here.
So I'm talking about a fully knowing, fully rational person. And I think a fully
rational person. Yeah.
I think a fully knowing, fully rational person would properly calibrate the degree to which Trump poses a threat to whatever institutions he poses a threat to. And I believe it to be the case that he poses a particular amount of a threat. And I believe that particular amount of a threat, anyone who considers that to be minor, that's a bad position and will lead to bad results. And so if you're fully rationalized, if you're fully intelligent and you're properly calibrating the degree to which Trump is a threat, and you consider that threat to be small, insignificant, or whatever, that's bad. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I the way I see it is you're placing bets. Like when you either bet on Kamala Harris, you bet on Donald Trump. Right? Like, it's like two horses in a...
Yeah, and you would rather bet on Trump than Kamala. You said it.
Yeah, right. Do you think it's... And I'm misinformed. I'm clearly misinformed and foolish and probably a terrible person. I'm not a terrible person, but I'm certainly foolish and misinformed. But I guess, how can you... I guess, I don't know. How can you be certain that your assessment of the... You don't know. Ultimately, you can make predictions. Like if it's... What's your favorite sport? Do you watch football, NFL?
Soccer. Then NBA.
Okay, who's
then
the
rugby?
Okay, who's Golden State. Who's like the worst team in the NBA right now?
I don't know.
Who's a bad team?
A bad team.
The Rockets.
Probably the Rockets.
Okay, let's go with the Rockets for now. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
If Golden State is playing the Rockets, the odds are like 80-20 Golden State wins, right?
Okay, yeah.
That doesn't mean they're guaranteed to win.
I know we're talking about percentages here, yeah. So I'm talking about the
right.
The,
and
the percentage.
So do you agree that that's how political candidates are the same way? You cannot guarantee the outcome. You cannot guarantee that Trump, but you can rationally assess and say, well, here are all the reasons. Just like you can rationally assess who's going to win in a football game. Well, the Chiefs have a better defense. They just drafted this player, blah, blah, blah. And you can do different types of analysis. And then ultimately you come up with a betting, with an odds. Like 60% the Chiefs are going to win, 40% the Bears are going to win. It's the exact same process for political candidates. 60% chance, like who produces a better outcome overall? Either Trump, either Kamala. 60-40, 80-20. Now you say any rational person
the
would
Rockets
put
are
the
actually
odds
good this
at,
season. My bad. Hang on.
Fuck.
Please, you didn't correct that.
I don't know. I don't watch any NBA.
I'm gonna look at the Western standings. I just want to make sure.
My point is, from my experience and my observation, there are very clearly many
Wizards, Hornets.
Wizards, Hornets are bad.
Yeah.
There are clearly many people, rational conservatives, who I don't even know. I guess this is another interesting question. I do want to ask you about this. This is a separate thing. How do I say this? I don't know how to evaluate like Scott Bessent. You know who Scott Bessent is?
Yes, Secretary Treasurer.
When I listen to his interviews, there's nothing he says that I find to be deeply irrational.
Really?
Yeah.
So when he speaks in favor of the tariffs, you don't find that super irrational?
I mean, everyone agrees that tariffs in the right circumstances are
okay, but you were the one who said it, right? Like there's balance at the start, that there's a balance here, and so whatever the Trump tariff policy is, fucking sucks. And so you don't view when Scott Bessent is defending that kind of shit that he's. I know, and behind the cover, he's kind of pushing a little bit. That's fucking stupid. I just don't understand why we have to speak in this kind of language, this cagey language. And I think you kind of hinted at it when you're like, I don't want to be so outward against Trump because of the instrumental effects of it. But like, let's be honest here. Scott Bessent sounds like a fucking idiot when he's defending, indefensible policies.
Yeah, I just don't believe that. When like in the same way that I evaluate your logic and rationality is exactly how I evaluate Scott Bessent's. And both of those are telling me, I understand Scott Bessent's point. I understand Pisco's point. So is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, I do think there's something wrong with you, but I don't think you're an evil person because I think
I know that's fair. That's fine.
But I think there is something wrong with you. I think that one, you're someone who's been informing himself, who's doing commentary. You engage with a lot of, I know, very popular streamers. So you have there's no excuse for you not to have full information. And so I have to figure that you have some significant amount of information above and beyond what normal Americans, the everyday American, has.
Yes, I do believe. Just
by knowing who Scott Bessent is, just by knowing the three branches of government, you have, above and beyond the information that most people do. And for you, in that context, to prefer, even now, I think you'd prefer Trump over Kamala. And even now, kind of use equivocal language. When I say equivocal, I mean like, changing definitions or not completely, maybe the right word is dodgy language to describe what is the indefensible. I think that's a failing. That's a failing of you.
Who decides what's indefensible?
Yeah, so this is a boring point to get drawn into. I agree. All these judgments.
It's the fundamental point. It's the point you were raising earlier.
These ought judgments.
Exact same point.
I take them to be preferences. It's preferences. I don't think that there's such thing as an objective morality. But that's. I think everything grounds out that way. And so when we talk about what's good, I am trying to appeal to your preferences. I'm trying to appeal to your system. And I think, and my viewers' preferences, and I think that your preferences, if you really took down to interrogate them, maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, that you want to preserve the Constitution, that you want to preserve our system, and it's done good things for you. You're an American, right? I've been talking to a lot of Canadians. God's true chosen people. Yes. Yeah. So like I believe, as we're talking, that you want to preserve our country. And now you might have some like a little out there ideas about the authoritarian, whatever, the voting requirements or whatever. But
I don't think that's out there. I think everyone agrees with me whether they want to admit it or not.
Are you really okay with Trump deciding when he can break the law and when he can't break the law? Are you okay with that? I have to ask.
No, I think that's terrible.
Okay. So in general,
but perhaps the problems that we face are so significant that that's our only option.
You say perhaps.
How do we know if that's the case?
Is that your inclination? How do we know if that's the case? I don't know.
Yeah, but my guess is it is the case. My guess is the case. Okay. Yeah.
So then now I'm a little bit more pessimistic. If you think it is the case where we're at the point where the nation's problems must be solved, or it's most wise for them to be solved whereby Trump decides what's legal and illegal, I'm a little bit more pessimistic about whether I can reach you. I view that as pretty sad. I don't know.
Well, I certainly didn't come here to make you sad. I came here to tell you what I honestly believe.
But like, so you honestly believe we're in a state where we need Trump to decide for himself what's legal and illegal?
No.
Okay.
It's first off, it's not that simple. Okay. Two things. Number one, the entire world that I deal in is the primary world I deal in is the world of moral philosophy.
Okay.
When you talk about preferences, everything grounds out in preferences. That's where all of the discussion, in my opinion, should be had. I'm happy to have this discussion because I came here. We can engage with this or whatever. I'm constantly trying to get at that underlying thing to get to the point where it's like, because I'll talk to you, and you raise these valid points, right? But then I talk to someone who is as informed as you on the conservative side, and I go, that's also an interesting point. And it's not obvious to me. It's not like someone gets dunked on in one or the other. And I've seen that. I know like some sides are indefensible, like the antinatalism shit. That's a whole philosophical thing. But like there's certain sides that are I do believe there are things that are indefensible. But that's not how I would describe people who voted supporting Donald Trump. You could say, look,
well, you say you won't.
Donald Trump's imperfect.
So you won't even say it's bad.
Yeah, it is.
You said, well, sorry. At least comparatively,
one of the reasons
it was better than voting for Kamala. You agree? Voting for Trump was better than voting for Kamala. That's your
suspect. Opinion. I don't know. I suspect, but I don't know, and I would never say yes for sure. I don't know.
But I'm asking, is it your opinion that it was a better decision in the moment for people to vote for Trump than to vote for Kamala? Given those two options,
it's too early to tell.
No, so sorry. Given the information you had at the moment you made the decision, at the moment of the voting booth, when we are working in uncertainties, I grant you, we're working in uncertainties.
I said I would have voted for Trump.
So that's not neutral. That's having a preference for Trump over Kamala. That's having a preference for Trumpism over,
I would never have
centrist Democrat. Whether you would have voted for them or not, it is displaying a preference for Trumpism.
Correct. Sure. Yes. I don't disagree
view that as the corruption, and I want you to rise, just like the Skywalkers rise and the rise of Sky. I want you to.
Okay. Well, let me tell you what if you could make the best possible case for voting for Trump, that a Trump supporter would go, "Yep, that sounds about right." Could you do it?
The best possible case scenario for a
Can you steel man? Can you put yourself in the position of a Trump supporter and make the best case you can for voting for Donald Trump? That a Trump supporter would agree with.
Yeah, because I'll just say what the Trump sycophants all say, and because I say those.
No. The best case meaning the best case meaning not one that's like based on lies, like the best valid case that you can possibly come up with.
Could I? I could.
Yeah.
You want me to try right now to make a valid case?
Maybe not if you haven't thought about it. I guess
would appeal to a Trump supporter. Like that's asking me
to. That doesn't require line.
I think I could try to do that, but if you're premising on it must appeal to a Trump supporter, that it's not going to reflect my beliefs or my preferences. It's just going to be inherently inauthentic, and it's going to appeal to preferences which I think are bad, probably, or at least misinformed.
I don't know. The tariffs. It's very easy to steel man the tariffs.
I don't think it's very easy to steel man these tariffs.
Here we go. Ready? Watch. Ready? We're going to put absurd tariffs on countries, and then we're going to use it as a negotiating tactic, which is already proven out.
I will say it hasn't proven out.
Hold on. True or false? True or false? All right, now here's me evaluating whether or not you're a reliable commentator who is in possession of all the full information.
Uh-huh.
True or false? Trump has used threats of tariffs to negotiate deals that are favorable to the United States.
In the past, in his tenure?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
As president.
Yes.
Okay. Did we just sign a trade deal with the UK?
No.
We didn't?
No.
What was Keir Starmer signing with?
Kind of like a memorandum of understanding to eventually come to a deal.
Oh, that wasn't an official deal?
No. Those take like months to work out.
What was the memorandum of understanding? What was the content of it?
It's basically there's going to be at some point some tariff rate that at a specified amount, and that they have an agreement to reach a deal of some kind. The basic sort of outline.
But you don't consider, it's not a deal. But if it becomes a deal, then we can say that the tariff strategy, at least in that regard, was successful.
No, because it'll leave us worse off than when we would have if we never had the strategy in the first place. The deal that they're proposing would still have like a baseline 10. We're talking about a situation.
Here's a philosophical. Well, okay.
Oh my God.
This goes
so we can never evaluate any decision because we can never know for certain if something else would have happened. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying it's very difficult to evaluate very complex, wide-ranging decisions in a very short period of time.
In this case,
the only thing you can do is use heuristics.
Well, in this case, we know that this tariff strategy. So I think the count of the change in the tariff policy is something like 50 times. In that interim, what large gains has Americans received? You agree, by the way, in response to those tariffs, the Americans have faced true costs, and the Americans, by and large, disagree with the tariffs. Agree on those two facts that Americans have incurred major costs on the tariff strategies so far, and that Americans, by and large, don't like the tariff strategy. Agree with both those facts?
That sounds plausible. Yes.
Okay. So, what do you agree with it? Whether it sounds plausible or not? More likely than not, what I'm saying is true.
More likely than not? Yeah, probably more likely than not.
Okay.
So that's why I said plausible.
So they have imposed real cost. In exchange, Trump has gotten nothing. Trump has gotten
for now.
Nothing. And
do you accept?
Yeah.
Do you accept that it's possible that it is a long-term strategy, and that the rewards won't be reaped for much later on?
No, I don't think it's possible. It's a long-term strategy, because if it were a long-term strategy where they're just trying to like reshore domestic production, then they would be looking for more permanent, stable tariff rates and not these kind of erratic.
Tariff rates can change at any given time.
I'm sorry. Tariff rates can. Okay, what is that statement? What do you think that statement means? Yeah, tariff rates can change. That doesn't address anything we're talking about.
Why does it need to be stable? It just needs to be adaptive in the face of circumstances.
If you want to reshore American production, you're not changing the tariff rates as a purported ploy to get to free trade, right? You're not trying to get free trade.
Let's get to the philosophy. Let's get to the underlying philosophy of it. Do you agree that a reasonable person can be in favor of sort of the reshoring, manufacturing, and kind of degrowth mentality? Like what Donald Trump said about people have $30, maybe they only need $2. I agree with that.
By reasonable person is someone who's generally in their faculties, then I guess so. Yeah. If what you mean by reasonable person is someone who has my preference structure, then no.
Okay, let me ask you this. This is the fundamental philosophical question that I wanted to get to.
Okay.
Because this is, I spoke to Destiny a few times, and one of the conversations was about intuition, the importance of intuition, vibes, to put it in meme terminology. Most of our decisions. This is a neurocognitive fact. Most of the information that we process is intuitive. It's not articulated. It's unconscious. Okay. Most of our decisions are made intuitively. All reasoning is motivated reasoning, so on and so forth. Okay. The entire legal system is based on vibes. The entire legal system is based entirely on subjectivity, and it's called the reasonable person standard. There's no such thing as an objective definition of a reasonable person standard. The reasonable person standard is entirely, fundamentally, and functionally a product of vibes-based analysis. True or false?
Somewhat. It depends. So there is versions of the reasonable person test which are more objective in the sense of they look to like the average person or the average doctor, or in cases of the reasonable doctor, they might look to certain objective standards of what most doctors would say they would do at a time. And so I don't think that every incarnation of the reasonable person test is vibes based. I think a lot of them are probably intuitive, but here's the key part of it. It's iterative. It's not just every time it's just something new. So the objective lens that we have over a course of time, yes, even though it started vibes based, because it all started when we were monkeys. We weren't actually monkeys, whatever. We were all waving around bones and stuff.
I get your point. Yeah.
Yeah. At some point it started vibes based, but over time we have this thing called precedent. And that precedent,
correct.
Once it's been established, okay, it is reasonable to do X. Well, now, yeah, at one time it was vibes, but now it's set in stone. And now we have this precedent we can look at and compare, and we can be like, is this more like that case that we all agree to, or is it less like the case that we all agree to? And so in that sense, I don't think it's vibes all the way down. It's vibes when it started, but now as we have a foundation that's built out.
But that foundation is built on vibes, and
it was built on vibes.
We overturned.
But now we can be more objective about it. But I agree, a lot of it's like what the judge drank in the morning. I'm a realist when it comes to that kind of stuff. I'm not denying that there's a place here for arbitrariness, a place here for preferences, a place here for subjectivity. You're knocking on an open door. I agree with all that stuff, but none of that.
No, I'm saying everything fundamentally is grounded in that.
Agreed. I mean, I'm kind of like that as well.
And because of that. That is why, the same reason that you said, well, I have to evaluate when I'm making AR-15s illegal, the political capital of it, I'm going to get pushback. That's why I'm not going to sit here and say it's evil. It was certainly wrong to vote for Trump. I don't believe that.
Well, would you say it's certainly wrong to violate the First Amendment and violate free speech? What would you say that of? If
well,
you snap frame?
So the simple answer would be no, but like blowing air horns in someone's face is not free speech. Like, of course, there's conditions on it.
No,
child corn is not free speech.
Right? There are some things you would condemn. For like example, but if I deployed this analysis and was like, hey, how do you know that in this instance, like you wouldn't accept that of me because you have, even though at bottom a lot of it's intuition, or even all of it is intuition and all of it is vibes. You have the preferences.
Yeah, it's not all. It's not all, but it certainly is a great deal.
Yeah, you have the preferences that you have, and your preferences tell you either to think something is going to be good or bad, or that you have an inclination for it or not. That's kind of circular, what I'm saying here. But all I'm trying to say is, you use that preference structure to condemn some things and not other things. And I would,
correct.
Notwithstanding the fact that it's all kind of based on things that are elusive to the mind and where they come from, who knows. So I would ask you why. Given all of the failings of, at least you could say, I'm agnostic as to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. But you don't do that. You don't say I'm agnostic. You say, on balance between the two, it was probably better to vote for Trump than Kamala. And so how can you take this ultimately, I'm the...
Why am I saying that?
Yeah, so why are you taking a stance on it? You're not agnostic.
Yeah, because I'm telling you what I really believe instead of lying to you. If I told you I'm not sure, that would be a lie, because I do. Okay. My gut is telling me, my intuitions, which, by the way, the intuitions is a. I need to find a better way to talk about this, because your intuition is very sophisticated. If you constantly, there's all kinds of information that's in your intuition that is valid, that was once valid conscious information that is true, that you just you used to follow your gut. So, for example, if I see 10 intelligent people. You want to know why I believe evolution is true?
Why?
Vibes, intuition. Not because I've ever heard. I understand the mechanism, but because all of the people who I regard as intelligent and rational believe it's true, even though they disagree on everything else. But it's all the people who deny evolution don't seem very intelligent.
All the intelligent people that vote for Trump over Harris?
No, not at all. No. I'm speaking to the value of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the Earth being round. I could not honestly tell you really any argument for why the Earth is round. I know that like if you look at a ship coming over the ocean, like
wait a second,
it looks like it's coming up a curve.
If you
so hold on, what I'm saying is, you asked me why would I say Paul, do you believe that at the time your vote was correct? I'd say, I'm telling you what I really believe, not because I think I can necessarily provide the best. I can't. I know I can't provide. I didn't trust me. I was not coming here with any intention of making the best argument for Trump to you. That's not my intention, nor would it be valuable for anyone here. But I'm telling you what I honestly believe because I think it's more interesting and more valuable in the long run. For example, everyone watching probably can now very clearly go, well, this PF Young guy is not worth listening to. F him, he's dumb. There's nothing
I'm not saying that.
You're not. No, you're not. You're not. Yes, you're not. Certainly, some people would, and correctly so. I wouldn't blame them. But that's a more honest way. I would rather be honest with you than.
No, I appreciate that.
Than not. I guess that's why.
Can I?
Now, if I
yeah, go for it.
And then the other big thing is because I get this is why people are the most confused. It's like, okay, Paul, fine. You say, yeah, you think there's a good chance that voting for Trump was the right move over Kamala, all in all.
Yeah.
But here you are. I'm talking to Pisco, who is objectively, I acknowledge, is more informed than me. And he's, bringing up these different points. And as you're bringing up the immigration stuff, I'm like, yeah, I really don't know down to the details to be able to argue it. I know the gist of the, like a no catch and release is an issue with nuance, as you put it.
Yeah, it's an issue, but as you sort of related,
yeah, but like as you pointed out, there's all kinds of nuances.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, there's all kinds of nuance there. And so people go, all right, I can understand you being honest about this, but why do you still have the opinion you do when here I am talking to someone who's basically in real time telling me what is wrong with my beliefs? And the answer is because no, I'll tell you, I know exactly why.
Okay.
My inability to defend my own beliefs says nothing about whether those beliefs are true. For the exact same reason where, if hypothetically, I was talking to Ben Shapiro right now, who's far more intelligent than I am and whatever, knows far more all of the political policy, I would feel and be in the exact same state, even though as I try to levy criticisms against Ben Shapiro about Trump. I go, God damn, Ben, I haven't looked into this as much as you really, so I can't really say anything about it. So really, the ultimate way in which I evaluate what's true is when I see debates or real good faith conversations between someone like a you and someone like a Ben Shapiro. And I think, like, for example, the Ben Shapiro Destiny conversation was very productive. I think Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris is one of the philosophical. Yeah, I think so, in terms of figuring out.
I think the Peterson-Harris conversation was very unproductive. That's just me, though.
Well, that's fine. You're a lawyer. Yeah, that's fine. That is to be expected from the lawyer brain. Which is not necessarily, it's an insult to some degree, but only in the same sense that I'm schizo, and I have the broader pattern abstract shit. But my point is, yeah, I'm willing to tell you what I honestly believe, and that's the reason it's because, surely you know that I know that I'm uninformed on a lot of these issues.
I think that relative to someone,
which, to be clear, I am.
On immigration, I'd say you're probably uninformed relative to me because immigration is an issue that I really, really care about, and the nuances of all these cases, right, which I spend a lot of time, and also I've had the privilege of taking immigration classes and doing an immigration clinic and
sure,
work and having clients on immigration work, and so I think it's fair to say that you're more uninformed on immigration than I am. You probably know more about Jordan Peterson's views than I do, so it's all relative in that sense. But I don't think that we should. That's
true. That doesn't count for much, though.
Yeah, I think if we ultimately take as given your senses, take as given, the uniform nature of the universe in some sense, or the causality, take as given the rules of logic, and don't feel the need to justify them. It kind of feels like one of these conversations with a presuppositional person who wants you to.
I hate the presuppositionalist. Nobody hates presuppositionalism more than I do.
Yeah. So just take an epistemical frame of reference that assumes as given your, your natural senses, your observations, the rules of logic or whatever, right? I don't even know necessarily what that means. The logic part of it. I just, it's hard for me to justify logic. I don't even know what that would mean. But if you take that epistemic reference and you just don't try to justify it anymore, you can begin to start to epistemically justify things using that frame of reference beyond just your vibes. So you can justify the shape of the earth. Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, but it depends. Yes, and vibes means many different things in different circumstances. But your point is, well, if you take for granted a moral system with the preferences, which I do, obviously I live my day-to-day life. I make moral judgments all the time. But this is part of I guess this is why I'm interested in talking to people like you, where it's like, that's exactly what the intelligent Trump supporters are doing. And what I hear often is, well, they're not intelligent. Like the only reason someone could have voted for Trump is if they are uninformed, immoral, or have some fundamental flaw in their reasoning capabilities. Like, and when you say that, that guarantees just again, out of being honest, that's the thing that makes me most skeptical of everything else you have to say. Because I know for a fact that's not true, because I know intelligent, rational, moral people who support Donald Trump and are as informed about the issue as you.
Would you say that of people who voted for Adolf Hitler?
From my perception.
Would you say that of people who voted for Adolf Hitler?
Unfortunately, yeah, probably.
If Satan were literally a candidate, would you say that of people who voted for the embodiment of Christian evil?
I don't. That one's a harder metaphor. It's Hitler was a real human being, and there were real humans.
I
and
know.
There were real human
it's
conditions.
A hypo.
Satan is are you asking me? No, I would say the only person who could support unequivocal, unjustified, unadulterated evil are evil themselves.
Yeah. So I think
Hitler was not Hitler. Hitler turned out to be that, but at the time, people didn't necessarily know that was going to happen for sure.
Yeah. So you're taking a view which
there were obviously, to be clear, there were obviously signs. Yeah. I'm just saying, like,
we
it's
won't
obviously much more
that
complex.
any further, PF Young.
Yeah, but like
Paul,
that's why people say, yeah, Paul.
Okay. Yeah. So Paul, I take that you're having a kind of who's this guy? He talks like this, and now we'll have our friend Vladimir Zelensky.
Lex Friedman.
This guy, Lex Friedman. Yeah. So you're taking a kind of Lex Friedman like
a little bit,
and I respect it because my father was very much like that, where he sees the good in people. He sees that like very much like people can be good even. So I understand that, and even I'll grant some of it in the sense that if you voted for Trump, even being fully informed, even being fully rational, I am saying that there's an area where you're just really evil in politics, but other aspects of your life, you're a very good person. That on net, I'm not going to call you evil just because you did that. But I will at least say, restricted to the domain of politics, I will say that it was evil to vote for Trump, having been fully informed and fully rational. Like, I just think that that's the case. And I think it's evil because you're bringing about evil. It's an evil decision to bring about evil. What does evil mean other than bringing about evil, or at least doing something that ought not be done? And so I just take it as a given, as a definitional. If I view bringing about Trump as something you ought not do, then something you ought not do is vote for Trump that helps bring that about. And so to me, that's just an analytic fact. And maybe on a whole, that person isn't evil, but that decision, it's hard for me to characterize a fully informed, knowing decision, rational decision as anything other than evil, but by my lights being something someone ought not do.
Sure, but you're self-justifying it. No, yeah, you're saying one ought not do that. Yeah, but you can understand from
yeah, go ahead.
Do you agree that conservative this is a broader political philosophy question? Do you agree that there's such a thing as conservative personality, conservative temperament, and progressive temperament? Right? Like conservatives value things that progressives literally don't value simply by their wiring, their neurological wiring.
If you're saying that conservatives and liberals tend to have different preferences, I would say probably yes, if that's what you mean by that.
Yes.
And if they're related to their neurobiology, I'm agnostic on that. I don't know. Probably.
Okay, fine. Yeah, there's no reason to believe. I would say the evidence for that is
I'm not sure.
Significant. It's cross-cultural.
I just don't know about
fair
it.
Enough.
You probably know more.
Yes, I will say no one should. I don't blame anyone for being skeptical. But on this issue, I am unlike. On this issue, I happen to know that is absolutely the case. Okay. It's cross-cultural. The studies are significant. Jonathan Haidt's work talks about it, among others. But
is that some kind of Nazi scientist? I'm just kidding.
Jonathan Haidt?
No, I'm joking.
I think
actually don't. I don't know who that is, by the way. I'll be honest. I'll be honest. When I don't know who someone is, I'll be honest. I don't know who Jonathan Haidt is. I'm sure Joanna knows.
Jonathan Haidt. Yeah, I need to get more people to watch his 20-minute TED Talk. It opens up a lot of things. But anyway, the point is conservatives have different fundamental preferences than progressives on some things, like in group loyalty, for example. What's a better one? Yeah, like progressives don't really put much stock in in-group that much stock in in-group loyalty.
Okay.
Like some like, and conservatives do. Who's to say which is correct? Like fundamentally?
Yeah, there's no object. So I've already granted to you that I agree that there's no like.
Yeah. All right, I get it. That's fair enough.
I don't believe in what's the
I
term?
think we both. All right.
Stance independent moral truths. Like,
oh my god,
I don't know what that means,
yeah.
but yeah, no.
That's fair.
I take as granted that, but all I'm saying is taking that as granted, I can call certain things evil, and what I mean by evil are things you ought not do, and so because I think you ought not vote for Trump, I would consider that to be evil. Now, maybe if I'm trying to appeal, go ahead.
That's it, because we've gone meta for the past 3 minutes, which is interesting. I do like the meta. That's a conversation I am more. And to be clear, because I'm on your channel too. I also am willing to go into the answer your questions about all that different stuff. Because if it was up to me, I would not argue with a well-informed lawyer on an issue I know very little about, other than to, just let them know what I honestly believe.
You just let me know when I can ask questions.
I know you're a lawyer. You love it. I like asking the questions. Whoever's asking, is it a general rule of thumb that the person asking the questions is in a better? It's like it's better to be asking the questions than answering the questions. You have much more power because you set the frame and all that. Is that like an explicit thing in law?
I don't know. It's probably like not always. There can be cases where you don't want to ask certain questions. I can think of situations where you might say to God, I don't want to know or something. I don't really know. There's some postures probably when you don't want to ask questions. For example, sometimes you have like a witness who might be like really sympathetic, who you don't want to ask questions of because being an asshole to like a child who is accusing your client might come out at might earn you no favors with the jury. So there have been instances before where like people have lawyers have like refrained from cross-examining the grieving widow or something,
Yeah, that's fair. I guess to bring it back to maybe a specific thing, the claim. So conservatives and progressives have different. You agree, different preferences, different preference systems. Okay, so
sure.
Is it possible, and then it becomes a fact of the matter to dispute, that the threat of Trump being a fascist, like breaking our laws because he gets to decide what's legal or not, is not as great as allowing people who and I'll just be very specific, like Chinese nationals who could be trained by the CCP to, in case we do get in a war over Taiwan, to bomb all of our substations, which are among the most vulnerable infrastructure we have, and our entire society would collapse. Because I just want to say, my intuition is that I'm more worried about the I'm more worried about the power going out from attacks, electronic attacks, EMP attacks, sabotage to our substation, than I am about fascism in the United States.
Okay. I think that what
do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I disagree, because I basically want to prevent America from turning into China. I view China as a country, although it has some benefits to it and like certainly some economic growth, I view their political system as kind of reprehensible and not maximizing long-term outcomes for people and long-term, culture wins and stuff like that. And so even though I do very much think that there's a security risk that I frankly people should take seriously for China, either by having some cooperation with China or by having a unified front against China and not pissing off our allies. One of those two approaches should be taken, by the way. You should either fight China with full force with your allies on your side, or you should have some kind of unifying dialogues with them. One of those two, not having this kind of be enemies of everything approach. But I do take that threat seriously. I just think it's more existential to preserve America and stop it from becoming like China in that there are no rights.
Here's a disagreement. I think the existential I think if the power grid went out for 30 days, that would be worse. That's the end of the world. And I think it's possible that there's a higher likelihood that happens than Donald Trump imposes what exactly? Fascism with what end? Like killing certain people, killing minorities or something, or what?
Yeah, so a system in which
What's the worst case? Let me ask you a question. What's the worst case scenario? Donald Trump if things continue on their path and people like me continue to be fooled by him, and I cannot see the light.
Yeah.
What happens? What is the worst case scenario?
Well, the worst case scenario is there's nuclear war, we all die, I guess. So maybe that's the worst case scenario. But a realistic scenario, which I view as potential, is if Trump is successful and is able to become king, or an authoritarian equivalent of a king, and to establish a kind of bloodline or ideological monarchy, the freedoms that we enjoy today will be lost, and lost specifically to me and people who are critical and people who are not critical. I think that overall our economic reduction will go down, and so we'll start to be more relevant, and the fall of the American empire will be imminent. I think that will be bad for a lot of reasons. I think that it will lead to war, because dictatorships like his, he's already had expansionist visions, and if there's no check on his authority, go.
I get that. So but in a sense, you're saying your fundamental worry is Trump establishes a hereditary monarchy.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the probability as of right now? Total guess, I get it. But if you had to it's a rough intuition check. What's the probability that happens if people like me continue to blindly support him in my ignorant way?
I think you're probably irrelevant to it, but people like you overall at this point, I think it's marginal, the effect at which independents like you who are kind of on the fence. I think it's more about the people the die is already cast. In other words, in many ways, the die is already cast.
As of right now, I'm saying right now, as of May 16th at 6:49 Central, what is the probability that outcome you think could happen?
It's low. It's like 3%. He's not moving fast enough, but 3% is a lot for me. 3% is a lot for me. I'll tell you the probability that. Okay, so here's the thing: the probability that in my lifetime, within the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, we could see mass civil disruption through the destruction of our power grid from a cyber attack with an enemy like China or something like that, or just coordinated attacks on substations. I don't know, 10, 15, 20%. A solar flare. The probability of solar existential. I don't view that as
okay. All right. Fair. Okay. So now I'm certain that. Okay.
Like America.
We have. Hold on. I thought I was incorrect. I thought I was incorrect in my worrying about not being that, not caring that much about Trump. Okay. Because we'd all be dead if the power grid goes out. It's over. We're done. It's the purge.
You think that there's a 10 to 15% chance that everyone's electricity goes out? When we have gas generators, we have things that aren't connected to the grid. We have it's a very diverse system of energy in this country. It's one of the strengths.
You know how long? No. Okay, let me ask you an honest question. How informed are you about the state of power grid resilience in the United States? Is this an area that you've looked into?
Minimally informed.
As a paranoid
person. I know that there's energy sources that don't rely on the power grid that exist across the country.
None of them are connected to. They're called. There's a name for them. No one, I promise you, watching this, me or you, is hooked up to that. If a substation to replace a substation can take up to 45 days, assuming, not a significant backlog. If there was a coordinated attack on our transmission lines, not the generation, the transmission lines, cell phone towers gone, we're done. The U.S. military has backup.
A physical attack?
Could be a variety. For even a solar flare. Okay,
solar flare. Take that out of that, because how do what we do?
True, you can't really.
That? Okay, yeah. So if we're talking about China,
true. Well, I would say
we need more legislation attack, or they could do I guess a cyber attack. I don't see how a cyber attack is going to knock out all power in America across the country. I just don't see that. And maybe you can.
I mean, you can
do that.
Yeah, well, you can overload generators and overload substations. That's what substations are. Literally down transmission lines that take the high voltage power from high power lines and down voltage them, so we can down voltage whatever, transform them or something, whatever the word is, to be able to go into people's houses. My point is, if I'm sounding like a paranoid person right now, just to be clear, that's fine. I don't care. It doesn't change my perception of things. I think it's way less paranoid than thinking Donald Trump will start a hereditary monarchy.
Really?
I find that. You know why? Yeah, you know why? Because so much of Donald Trump's base is critical of him. Do you watch Tucker Carlson?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. So do you agree he's one of the biggest influencers? Like conservative political commentators?
Yes.
Perhaps, if not, I mean, maybe even
I wouldn't
the biggest.
say he's the biggest. but I would say he's one
Who's
of
the biggest?
Conservative influencers at this point. I would say Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro.
Interesting. Okay, fine. They're all in the same tier at least. Whatever. Tucker Carlson's incredibly critical of Trump, especially when it comes to Israel.
I don't take Tucker Carlson to be the base. And there's a way of criticizing Trump.
All right, fair enough. This is all right. Genuine question. Who do you look to as the bellwethers for the base? I view Tucker Carlson as a very significant leading indicator of where the Republican conservative movement will end up 2 to 3 years from now.
I think the any given point. Bellwether of the base, in terms of the base, the right-wing populist base of Trump, is more akin to a Jack Posobiec than a Charlie Kirk. What I mean to say is they are beholden to the leader.
Okay. Okay. I mean, of
it's
the
a
people
cult.
who have
you and I agree it's a cult.
Correct.
You started this by saying
totally.
It's a cult. Yeah. So a cult is characterized 100%. By devotion to the
leader.
What
percentage of the people who voted for Donald Trump, what percentage would you say are in that cult? I would say about, I don't know, 20 to 25.
Probably 60 to 70%.
You think 60 to 70% of people who voted for Trump are cultic?
Yes.
I describe cultic as the people who commit blasphemy by holding up paintings of Trump as if he were Jesus Christ. That's what I consider the cult-like element. In fact, I think most conservatives are actually against that.
So maybe then I would say 20 to 30, 40%, something like that.
Okay. So so
if that's what you consider as cult, I consider cult to be more like fiendish
no matter
devotion,
what he does.
No matter what he does, and I base that off of like there's a bottom tier like floor of his approval rating, and I consider the people who would like never be moved on Trump, despite like inconsistent policies, you know, to be part of the cult.
Interesting.
But maybe,
I guess I'm just
the truly like wild devotees that you're considering the cult. Maybe I'm using the word cult inappropriately. It's probably lower than 60.
But the kind of person who would not criticize Trump under any circumstance.
It's a big percentage. I would say probably between
50?
20 and 40%.
Okay, well, let's say it's 50%.
Okay.
How is he going to establish a hereditary monarchy with what percentage of the whole population is that? 20?
If he controls the military, and if he arrests all of Congress and controls all the guns, and none of the state governors rise up and no one wants to fight him, it doesn't matter. I mean, there are hereditary monarchies that are where the people, you know, just go along to get along, and maybe they outsource their political capital to the leader.
I'm very glad we had
it's happened before, man. I mean, like, do you?
Let me be clear. I agree. Hold on. I'm not mocking because I'm well aware. For example, my whole little rant about the power grid sounds crazy, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true. And I would say you're actually an unbelievably privileged, arrogant person if you think that your life will just be that you will exist in a permanent state of stabilized civil society, even though you've never fucking experienced anything that has characterized most of humanity, which is civil collapse. And your point is kind of the same thing, the hereditary monarchy type thing.
Yeah, so I view the enemy from within as being more dangerous than the enemy from without. I view Trump as a more existential threat to this country than China. I'm just being honest with
you. I could maybe agree with that. I don't think China's not a super imperialist nation.
You can maybe agree that Trump is a bigger existential threat to the country than China, but you still think that Kamala Harris is not preferred to Trump? How? That's why I think there's a problem here. Make it make sense. Are you just agreeing with
Kamala
me right
Harris? No. But first off, it's a counterfactual. We don't know. The idea of like, I don't know what Kamala have done. I think, for example, Trump is, and again, this is all in the last couple of weeks. Trump seems to be doing more for Gaza now than Kamala or Biden ever did. They abided by genocide the entire time. Now, Trump is owned largely by Israel influence, or at least was, Miriam Adelson being his biggest donor, among others. He was very pro-Israel. But him being a narcissist who basically shifts his foreign policy because he hates Benjamin Netanyahu, well, that works out in favor of Palestine. But the idea that who for sure would have been better at this point up until now, Kamala or Trump for the Palestinians. At this point right now, the scales seem to be favoring Trump given his summit in Riyadh.
They're making plans right now to deport 1 million Gazans to Libya.
Who's they?
The Trump
Israel?
administration. Hang on, we'll pull it up right now.
Really?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
From
He's going back to his AI video.
Deport 1 million Libya. NBC News. Trump administration working on a plan to move 1 million Palestinians to Libya. Details are murky and no final agreement has been reached, but the plan is under serious enough consideration. The administration has discussed it with Libyan leadership. Trump administration is working on a plan to permanently relocate up to 1 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Libya. 5 people with knowledge of the effort told NBC News. The State Department and National Security Council did not respond, but they linked
What is the probability that happens? What do we think?
I don't know. What's the probability?
I don't know. This is my point. I don't know. This is the point. It's all the idea that it's for sure one way or the other. Because
like, again, the Palestinians are
when
under
Trump
worse
released
right now than under Biden, right? They are under worse assault right now than under Biden, and Israel has been given an open hand, so they're doing worse right now. Correct?
No, not necessarily, because Trump is. Biden did. Do you agree that Biden did jack fucking nothing to stop Israel from doing
anything? I don't agree with that.
Anything.
What you mean by jack nothing is literally nothing? No. At the start of the conflict, you agree.
Okay, effectively nothing.
No, I don't agree with that. Not enough. I agree, not enough. But nothing is the answer to that is no. He did actions, and some of them were significant.
Sure, you're right. Technically, yes, lawyer, not nothing. He did say he condemned it, and he said, what did he temporarily say? No, it wasn't no 2,000-pound bombs. 500-pound bombs are fine.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are
a month later, he sent the 2,000-pound bombs.
So there was. You agree? So for a time, there was a
hold on.
Yeah.
Well, I will take it. Hold on. Let me. Because what I was going to say is when Trump released the Gaza video, the AI video, I would agree with you. It's worse. It probably would have been worse. It would probably have, like at that point, I was like, well, fuck. Kamala probably would have been the better pick for the Palestinians at this point. Now, I don't even necessarily know that because I do think it is the meme of, well, Trump is just in your face about it. The Democrats did fucking Biden was in charge during the entire since October 7th, and had no track record of doing anything. And Kamala Harris talked out of her mouth about it the whole time. So I have no reason to believe that they would have deviated from their previous policy, which would have been just as bad for the Palestinians. And you say it's worse, it's like, how many people died over the course of Biden's...
Is that how you judge whether a policy is worse or better?
I suppose.
So, I mean, what
they would have continued to die and been ethnically cleansed, and they would have done nothing. They would have done nothing to resist Israel. And fucking Kamala Harris didn't talk shit about Netanyahu once. And Trump at least gave inclinations that he
to the extent that there's a divergence between Trump and Netanyahu, it's on things that the Biden administration was staunchly against, such as escalating the war and expanding it into Iran. To the extent that there's a further divergence, it's because of corrupt deals with the Saudi states. Now, it could be the case that as an attendant requirement to suss out these deals with the Gulf states, with the Arabian Peninsula, that they're not going to abide by continued Gazan war, and that could, I'm telling you, it's the potential. And if it does inure to their benefit, incidentally, I will give credit where credit is due. In stopping that conflict.
It's too early to tell right now.
But right now, all the evidence shows that things are much, much worse for the Palestinians under Trump than under Biden or Kamala Harris. And there's objective proof to demonstrate that.
Like what?
For example, I was about to go into it. So, for example, currently there is a whole embargo on Gaza that was
starvation.
It's a starvation policy. That started on after October 7th, which, by the way, different circumstances, by the way. So, like, when Biden was presiding over that war, I agree there should have been more done to get to a ceasefire deal and to have it stay, right? And he should have done more. He should have been more aggressive towards Bibi, who kind of used him. But it's also a different stance. Like, in those first months, do you agree that they should have retaliated for October 7th, yes or no?
Yeah, they should have killed all the Hamas terrorists in their territory.
Okay, so
depends on what you mean by retaliate.
So Biden was fundamentally in a different position in the first early months, and over time, he should have been stronger against Israel. On that, we're agreed, 100%. But he stopped in the days after October 7th. He pressured Netanyahu to lift the full embargo that is now in place. That is a material difference. The bombs that you mentioned, as though there's some trivial thing, Biden stopped.
I don't consider that a material difference. It's not a material difference if he delayed something and then inevitably continued the genocide.
Sorry. So if you think it's immaterial whether or not these whatever ton bombs have been sent to Israel, even though Israel was complaining about it not being sent, so it's clearly material for Israel
that they then got later. That they then got later.
They got under Trump who released the ban.
No. Under Biden, it was the Rafah. Rafah's the red line. Rafah's the red line.
Okay,
Rafah's the red line. They go into Rafah.
No, now you're changing the subject. We were talking about the bombs. Do you think that's material or not?
No. That's what I was referring to when I was talking about the bombs. Was Rafah the red line, supposed red line, crossed it. We're going to delay the shipment. We're going to delay the weapon shipment. Israel complains, and then what was like a month later, they got their fucking 2,000-pound bombs under Biden.
Well, no. But Trump. Hang on, we'll pull this up.
Hold it. Okay, the broader point. This is the broader point. What is the broader point?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, U.S. sends Israel 2,000 bombs. This is February 2025.
Look up
the Biden administration stopped sending the 2,000 bombs to Israel after conceding they were killing civilians in Gaza. But soon after being sworn in, U.S. President Donald Trump lifted the export block. Now the flow of weapons has restarted. Minister Israel Katz welcomed the delivery, calling it a, quote, significant asset for the Air Force and the IDF, and thanking the U.S. for its, quote, unwavering support.
Okay, all right, hold on. I recall now the point here. Donald Trump could very well be the most evil president you've ever had.
Wait, do you acknowledge that the bombs situation was material, yes or no? Do you acknowledge that?
No, I don't acknowledge that.
Okay, so when Israel says it's significant...
Because under Biden, the genocide continued. And Biden proved that that the U.S. was not going to do anything even after establishing red lines. We're going to have a red line. You cross it. Oh, we're still going to support you anyway. Is the genocide
continuing under Trump?
So arguably
genocide
that's
continuing
worse.
under Trump? Is the genocide continuing under Trump?
Yes.
So
of course.
By what metric can you say Trump is better than Biden?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's not obvious that Kamala would have been better. That was my point.
That is obvious to me because I do you agree that Kamala wouldn't have a green lit or had any plans
no
to send
fucking
Palestinians?
Clue.
Do you think that Kamala Harris just be real with me right now? Be honest with me, just like you were.
Okay, I'll be real with you.
Okay, do you think Kamala Harris? I'm
not hiding any power level here or anything. I'm telling you what I honestly think.
Do you think that Kamala Harris would have entertained plans to deport 1 million Palestinians to Libya? Do you think she would have entertained that?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
I think that's crazy.
Why not? What evidence did she have? The fact that she did not say one fucking word about Netanyahu and how he's a war criminal or anything, why the would I believe that she would have done anything to resist Israel's demands?
Do you want the honest answer to that?
Yeah. What?
Yeah. While she's vice president, she can't undercut Biden. If she does, she can't. And you know that to be
fine. In her interviews when she was running for president, when she was running for president, she was asked about Netanyahu.
I know.
And she fucking avoided the question. She said nothing. So that's the evidence to me.
Put on your real. Why do you think she did that? Why do you think she did that?
Because Israel exerts a disgusting level of influence over U.S. foreign policy, and she has to abide by basically their will.
So she is the.
Do you disagree with that? Am I wrong? Do you think I'm wrong about that?
I think that Israel does exert a lot of influence in terms of, or if not Israel, supporters of Israel within the United States, which
correct.
I do consider to be different. They do exert a lot of influence on foreign policy. Okay. I do agree with that. They're not the only ones. Qatar also influences foreign policy in this country, as clearly shown by the corruption.
Oh my God!
Whether it's close or not, I'm not here to say you one way or the other. I'm just saying it's not the only country.
Fine.
But I agree.
As long as we agree, it's not even remotely close.
I'm not here to characterize it. I do think that over time, Israel has had far too much influence. I think in general, that magnitude of it is probably more than Qatar. I would agree on that. That's probably the case. I haven't done deep dive studies in it or whatever, but she's speaking in code with respect to the Netanyahu issue, because if she comes out and says Netanyahu is a genocidal freak, she's undercutting the ceasefire negotiations. Agree with that?
Of course.
Okay, so she has a responsibility to not just be.
Wait, hold on, wait. Sorry. She's undercutting the ceasefire negotiations?
100%. If the sitting vice, I need you to agree yes or no to this. If the sitting vice president, while Joe Biden and his team are engaged in negotiations for a ceasefire deal, if the sitting vice president running for president says Netanyahu's a genocidal freak, does that undercut ceasefire negotiations? Yes or no?
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
So she has a responsibility not to run her mouth like Trump does every second. She has a responsibility not just to Americans and American foreign policy, but the Palestinians themselves. If she starts running her mouth on these diplomatic issues, I agree. Biden was too weak. I don't think that, but she doesn't. She's not the president at that time, and she is endangering, potentially imperiling ceasefire negotiations.
I'm saying
she does that
while she was running for president, she did not say what needed to be said, which is Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, needs to go, and we're not going to supply aid to Israel until things materially change in Gaza. Now, did Trump say that? No, of course not. But that's my point.
But Kamala Harris is in a different situation, right? So, like, I agree. If a Democratic candidate, and that's one of the problems with it being Kamala Harris in the first place, and one of the reasons why I think that Joe Biden should have never run for a second term, and we would have a different candidate than Kamala Harris. But she, as a sitting officer of the United States, she's the number 2 to the Biden administration. If she runs her mouth and says, Bibi should not be the leader of Israel, you understand how much of an international crisis that would cause to ongoing ceasefire negotiations?
Chuck Schumer said that.
When did Chuck Schumer say that?
Chuck Schumer said we need regime change in Israel.
Okay. Fair enough. He might have said that. He is not in the same position as the executive branch.
Speaker of the House?
Who is,
was he Speaker of the House at the time?
No. So he's a senator.
No, that was Adam Schiff, wasn't it?
So he might have been the Senate Majority Leader. I don't know what he might have said that. If he did say that, right. That's all great. I hate Netanyahu. Kamala Harris is part of the administration. If she says that as the Vice President of the United States, it imperils, and Joe Biden's not on board, right? Imagine that. Imagine Joe Biden is not on, because he's not on board. If she says
because he's mentally decrepit, he's not there. We agree that, right?
Well, he's
totally
certainly, he's certainly cognitively declined. But if he says that, or if she says that, it will cause a crisis in the ongoing negotiations that ultimately were futile because Bibi had no intention of abiding by it. But that were, but like Trump is running from the right on Israel and is pressuring them to be not.
He lifted sanctions on settlers. Settlers are the most vile degenerates in the Middle East on the scale of Hamas. Like,
you're not even going to admit of the significant policy differences between Trump and Biden on Israel, which I believe are significant. You're not even going to grant that they're significant, whether it's the blockade or the full embargo on all aid, or whether it's the bunker busting bombs. You think that they're not significant, even though Israel considers them.
I'll tell you again what I believe. I have no reason to believe that Kamala Harris would have done anything that effectively resisted what Israel is doing to the Palestinians now.
Okay.
Given the Biden administration did nothing effectively, which you sound like you agree with, not literally nothing, but not enough.
I literally did not agree with that.
Not enough. Fine, not enough.
I agree, not enough. Yes.
Okay, not enough. Okay, and Kamala made zero indication in any of her campaign speeches or interviews that she would deviate from that.
That's not so.
What did she say on the campaign trail?
So she did not, in so many words, say that she would deviate from Biden on Israel, Gaza issues. That's because she was playing a delicate dance, and Trump was the whole time saying we should, finish them. We should not let them have any succor whatsoever. And so, so at this time, she was indicating a more humanitarian approach by saying things like, "Yes, Hamas is the villain, Hamas is the enemy, but also we need to balance that with civilian casualties." You never heard that, not even now. You have never heard that from Trump, that we need to care about the Palestinians, because he doesn't give a about the Palestinians. That's why he's planning to deport them all. That's why
I've seen multiple.
Look at the domestic situation too on this issue, right? You are not considering the fact, like, we are canceling student visas on this issue. We are, stopping influencers at the border. Like,
it's insane.
For you to pretend that
Hassan Piker, that's okay, but no, everything else is insane. I'm kidding.
For you to pretend that there's not a material difference in the benefit of Israel, and that they got the candidate they wanted. Yeah, they're not getting the broader war so far that they wanted. They're not getting that so far that they wanted, but they are having a free hand in Palestine, which they weren't getting, right? The whole time that this war was going on, it wasn't enough, but the Biden administration was wringing its hands. It wanted it over. The Trump administration has not shown that indication. If anything, they're shown they're willing to give an open hand, and what they're willing to do for Israel is to let them annex it, which the Biden administration was never willing to do. And
correct. Right, and we said we were going to take it over. That's fucking insane. Yeah, I agree. Trump is
so he's worse. He's worse on this issue, right? Is he worse on this issue? Yes or no?
Okay.
Will you answer that?
It's impossible to say, Pisco. We just talked about this. Also, if this conversation were 3 weeks ago, I'd go unequivocally yes. But all of the reports, multiple outlets have reported that Trump was considering recognizing a Palestinian state. Where the fuck is that coming from?
Yeah, I mean,
let me ask you a question.
I'll see it when I believe it.
Let me ask you a question.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay, that's my whole point for the past fucking 30 minutes.
No, but right now,
who cares right now? It's just we're just masturbating. We're just throwing shit out here. Well, maybe.
Trump
I'm telling you, I don't know.
Trump recognized.
You want me to say yes when I'm telling you I don't know, which is what you
look at the track records here.
Agree with.
Trump
Okay.
recognized.
All right.
Trump was normalizing.
I'll let you.
Yeah. Okay. So Trump was normalizing with the Gulf states without cutting out the Palestinians. Trump recognized Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel. Trump is putting in major pro-Israel.
Pour up the JCPOA, or what is it? The Israel-Iran deal. That was fucking stupid.
He canceled the Iran deal. Now
Correct.
it is true. There's a true schism. I am being honest when saying that there is a schism between Bibi and Trump. It's a real one. It's based both on ideology, national interest, and personal corrupt interests of Trump. And so that has the potentially to inure to the benefits of the Palestinians. But so far, but that's also true, by the way, of the potential of the more humanitarian aspects of the Democratic coalition, and certainly of Kamala Harris, to have also been a way to pressure the both of them. I view them as both like untested things. It's untested whether the corruption of Trump will lead to benefit to the Palestinians. So far, all the evidence suggests that it's worse for the Palestinians. They are under worse of a strain now with Trump in office. They're considering deportation to a foreign land to live. Imagine this, right? Someone picking you up from your land and putting you into Libya in the midst of great like civil war and strife where there are open slave markets. Imagine, and with you having no say in it. That is one of the worst outcomes that can exist. And they're in talks with Libya.
Don't be anti-Semitic. Pisco, this sounds very anti-Semitic.
What about this anti-Semitic?
You're saying the Palestinians were expelled from their lands?
Yes, these are their lands, and yes, Gaza is their land.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
No, but like,
okay, I hear you.
I think that you are.
It's too early to tell. So we agree that it's too early to tell.
No, wait, for what? What is too early to tell?
Ultimately, whether or not the Palestinians will be worse off or better off under Trump. If, for example, go on very quickly. If this rift between Bibi and Trump continues, if Trump continues to cut Israel out of these meetings in Riyadh, and the Saudi Arabia, was it Lebanon and Syria, right?
I think
Saudi
Arabia,
three major players
Syria
there?
For sure.
I think Lebanon and Jordan maybe.
Potentially, yeah. I don't know. There was a meeting of these Arab states. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that Kamala would never have arranged something like that. I think Trump is able to do it uniquely because of his business ties to Saudi Arabia.
Wait a second, bro. Like Biden was.
Hold on. But I'm willing to grant maybe. I'm willing to grant potentially. But the point is, these are all new developments. It remains to be seen. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So I think a lot of this is going to be in the hands of the Gulf states. If the Gulf states are going to push that prior 100%. To these deals going on, that we need to have the situation, closed off. But that's going to encourage Israel to move quickly, right? And moving quickly is worse for the Palestinians. If they move quickly, what's going to happen is more genocide, more ethnic cleansing, literal deportations of hundreds of thousands of people. So that's going to be worse if there's a pressure from the administration to say, "Hey, Israel, get rid of this quickly." It's going to be really, really ugly, really, really bad. And yes, I can't tell you as for certainty overall will the outcome be worse under Trump's presidency because it's not over yet, I guess. But I will tell you currently they're worse off. And currently, I think the best projections are it will continue to be worse off than they would have been had we had a sane administration, a non-corrupt administration in place. And I think anyone
who could be correct.
Okay. But you're doubtful. You think on balance it's probably better to do the Trump approach.
I'm not. No. 2 months ago, Trump posted the AI video saying he's going to wipe out Gaza or whatever the meaning of that video was.
So are you willing to say that
I have no clue.
So you're indifferent. You really are indifferent. It's 50-50.
I don't know. That's what I'm telling you.
So I'm asking you, if you had a gun to your head right now on just the Israel-Palestine issue, who would you want to
right
charge?
Now? Okay, and I do gotta go here. So
no worries.
I'll end with this. Again, if you asked me this 3 weeks ago,
I'm asking you now.
I'd say Kamala. But now, given the summit in Riyadh, given his falling out with Netanyahu, I'm thinking too early to tell, and we'll see.
Well, no, you're
this is
thinking
generally
Trump,
how-
or you're indifferent. You're like, you're 50-50, kind of 50-50. Can't decide.
I'm 50-50.
Okay.
I suppose. Yeah, that means I don't know.
Hey, brother, great conversation. I know some of it's frustrating for our audience, but I
don't give a about your audience.
who gives a fuck?
Your audience is relevant to me. I genuinely look. I follow my curiosity. Okay, and obviously you're a good faith person. I think I saw when you first created your channel, the new one.
Yeah.
You said something at the beginning. I watched one of your videos, and it was like, "I'm here to call out bad arguments on either side," or something like that. And I was like,
fair and balanced, bro.
I like that. Fair and balanced, enlightened centrist. Yeah. Well, I certainly learned something from this conversation. I'd be happy to talk again, perhaps 100%. On a more specific. And to be honest, this was also just the first time we had talked in a while, so yeah, I'm okay with it going wherever it went. We can speak about maybe more specific issues that we can narrow down. But I'm glad that you agree that the entire legal system is fundamentally based on life.
Really nice talking to you. Let's talk again at some point in the future. We should revisit this specific issue on immigration stuff as well. And yeah, no, really enjoyed myself. And
yeah, you know what I am trying to do, and what I should be more diligent on is host more. I don't want to call them debates. I genuinely want to call them conversations. Yeah. We're like, okay, I want to bring you, and then I'll bring someone who I regard as being as informed on.
Yeah.
And it won't be a debate. It'll be me asking both of you questions and helping solidify my understanding. And I find that productive. But
that's an interesting format where it's like it's kind of like in Parliament, you're not supposed to address the other side. So we're just addressing your question. It's kind of
exactly. That's literally how I envision it. Because I know, and again, I do not blame anyone for whoever's watching this to doubt that I would do the opposite with conservatives. I'm as friendly as I am with you as conservatives, no problem. But I'm happy to push back. But that's exactly how I didn't know that's a good way to think about it. Is the Parliament version where it's like, no, Pisco, you're not talking to whoever else it is, Ben Shapiro. It's like you're talking to me. I'm asking you questions, and then as soon as you give me some information, I'll just go, okay, what he just said, is he right or wrong? What's up? And it's like I just want to try to get to the bottom of it, because if it just go back and forth, it's I don't know.
I'm super open to that, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, no,
you,
I love the conversation, and let's do it again.
Trump 2026, right?
Shut the fuck up. Yeah.
Or 28, right?
Hey, fuck.
Wait, no, honestly.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll be dead by then.
Jesus.
2028?
Are you 86,
How old is
47?
He now?
He's 78 or 9 or something.
Is Trump 78 now?
I think he's 78 or 79. Trump age 78.
Yeah, well, he's getting old, and I don't want what happened to Biden to happen to Trump. So I hope he, maybe not dead, but
you hope he dies.
Steps away.
I don't want the Biden.
I hope he dies
Trump,
peacefully in the
so
street.
I hope he dies. Hey, Paul.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much. Great talk, and we'll chat again soon.
Godspeed, Pisco.
Peace out.